I'd like to call to order the October 17th, 2012 meeting of the Milton School Committee. And as is our custom, I invite you to rise and salute the flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. First order of business is our approval of the agenda. A couple corrections on it under Finance Subcommittee report in Bob Patterson's not able to be here tonight as a technology director, but we will have the report. Matt will give it instead. Under the Finance Subcommittee report C, the end of year report, we're going to take that off tonight.
And
So
B.
pull that.
And B.
And B as well?
Yes.
Okay. And we'll take off 7B as well. And under 8, we are going to take off policy ACE. So 8A is coming off as well. First one was Matt is going to replace Bob Patterson on that report.
I'm happy to talk about that. I have more questions about it. I'm not sure I'm ready to vote on it.
Okay.
Do we have the wellness policy?
Yes, it was sent out.
I know, but there were some mistakes and I sent it back.
I said
Have that new one?
I'm happy to talk
Okay,
about it,
second
but
one
not
was sent
sure
out.
I'm ready to vote on
Oh,
it.
okay.
All right, so with those changes, in our executive session, the administrative contracts is actually negotiation strategy for non-union personnel, dealing with our administrative contracts. We're going to remove that? All right, we won't do that either. Did you still want to do the grievance?
Yes.
All right, so we will have the executive session to go over grievances. That will be the only item under the executive session. So with those changes, one other. We have 8 people signed up for Citizen Speak. We usually limit it to 15 minutes. With your permission, we'll extend it to allow these 8 people their 3 minutes each at the beginning of the meeting. All right?
Would that be in lieu of the citizen speak at the end?
Would you prefer to have it in lieu of the Citizen Speak in the end, or would leave that one there for 15 minutes as well?
I think we should remove it from the end and just have it the 15, if we're going to extend it the 30 minutes
No,
at the
well, it
beginning.
will only be 24 minutes. We're extending it by about 9 minutes. So let people speak.
What's the wish of the committee?
I don't think 15 minutes at the end of the meeting will hurt us.
So that we get the benefit of the citizen speak, why don't we suggest that anyone who wants to speak does it now?
Okay.
Anyone who wants to speak what?
Does it now, rather than have some now and some at the end. All right, so with those changes,
Mr. Chair,
yes,
did you mention 5C? What's the status of 5C?
5C is being taken off.
Great.
5B and C are, sorry, no,
No.
5C we didn't. I thought we were going to wait until we got there and decide. What's your preference? We've got a long agenda.
We have a long agenda. I think that deserves a really careful discussion, and I'm not sure we're going to have the time for that tonight, so my suggestion would be that we defer till the next meeting.
The superintendent's evaluation then defer
Yes.
to the next
I would
meeting?
prefer that.
All right, so I'll take that as a motion as well. So with those changes, tonight's agenda,
Yes,
everyone in favor?
yes.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so we will move into citizen speak, and since there are 8 names on here, I'll see if there's anyone else who wants to, but first up, Betty White and Tom Callahan, if you
This is
would come up here to the table.
This is off. This is on.
I'll just say it again, our policy is 3 minutes each on citizen speak. We have a lot to do tonight, and I would appreciate as people come up to speak that they try to hold it to that. Thank you. Tom and Betty.
Good evening. We're here to talk about the CPA ballot question that's going to be on the ballot in November. And in May, the town meeting voted to allow the voters to adopt the state's Community Preservation Act at a 1.5% tax surcharge, with allowing exemptions for low and moderate income families as well as the elderly. This program allows a local property tax surcharge to be used only for historic preservation, open space, and recreation land acquisition and capital improvements, and reasonably priced houses. Since the adoption of Proposition 2.5, the town has not been able to invest in these areas because we wanted to keep personnel key to our budgets. Since this law was passed in 2000, 148 Massachusetts municipalities have voted to join the CPA. So just like back, I think, 12 years ago, when Milton taxpayers supported the building of 6 new schools, we were able to get state matching funds. This is a similar thing where we're going to ask the taxpayers to support this, and we will be eligible for state matching funds and also eligible to receive grants. For the first time, there's been a change in the CPA law that now is allowing school athletic fields, parks to be rehabbed and restored, and that has been added to the CPA.
And that's basically why we came tonight, because of the relevance to the schools and the school athletic programs, excuse me, and the town's programs, athletic programs in general. Just to give you a quick sampling, Acton-Boxborough recently used CPA funds to install new lighting on their athletic fields at Acton-Boxborough High School. The town of Acton restored some, or built basketball courts at the Douglas School, an elementary school in town. Situate has established a ADA compliance school playground at one of their elementary schools. They also built a new high school softball field at Situate High. Quincy has used it for an outdoor environmental education classroom. So I can go on and on, I won't. As you can see, there are substantial town and school benefits to passing CPA, as Betty said, for the first time. CPA funds can be used for existing town owned fields. Before, you had to acquire a field, a new parcel with CPA funds before you could improve it. Now you can still do that, but you could take a capital improvement on any one of our playing fields in town and use CPA funds for that. So we think it would have substantial benefit for the school population, and as parents, and seeing some of the needs of some of our fields around town, we think it'd be a great benefit for Milton Public Schools. So.
And we have a website, and it's called preservemilton.org. We invite everyone to take a look at it. It answers a lot more questions and gives you a lot more information, as well as people who are involved in the committee. Thank you so much for your time.
Question?
Question.
Question.
For citizens speak?
Oh, no, citizen speak, sorry.
Thank you both.
But there's a technical point that I think is important.
Which is?
Which is, my understanding is that those funds are not available for artificial turf surfaces.
That's right. The only type of athletic capital improvement to an athletic field that is not eligible is, you're absolutely right, is artificial turf. My understanding, however, is, for instance, if Milton were found itself in a need to replace an artificial turf field, that the preparation of the field for the new surface could be an eligible use, but not the actual purchase of the surface. So there may be some partial benefit, even with Brooks Field. But that's correct.
Thanks.
Thank you. I neglected to ask you for the record for your addresses. I'm sorry. You are Milton. I know you're both Milton residents.
16 Orono Street, and a proud Tucker Pearson, Milton High School parent.
And I'm at 36 Ridge Road and a proud Milton High School parent.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Next, J.P. Plunkett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is J.P. Plunkett, 1 Ruggles Lane in Milton, graduate of Pierce School. I used to sit right here where I went K through 6, father of a first grade student in the English program. I'll definitely keep this way south of the 3 minutes. I just want to reiterate that I'm just wholeheartedly in favor of a cap of the French immersion program, primarily to protect the integrity, the resources, and the depth of staffing for the English students. Today I received no less than 15 phone calls, emails, and texts from people who are in support of a lot that we had to say last night and a lot that was written in today's Boston Herald. And I just wanted to read a quick text that I received from a 15-year-old. His name is Izzy. He's a sophomore at BC High, and he's a K through 8 Milton Public School student. Hello, Mr. Plunkett. This message is with my highest level of respect. I read the article in the Herald about the French program in Milton and saw your opinion on the matter, and I would just like to say I agree with your opinion to the fullest. In 5th grade, I was on the local channel at the town meeting. I was there because we lost days of recess due to the French program, and I just stated why I believed against it on television. Thank you for your belief. It is the right one. I spoke with Izzy about 20 minutes ago and asked him to elaborate, and he just flat out said every single Tuesday when he was in 5th grade, they had 0 recess because of an overwhelmingly crowded French program. So that's just one of many tangible reasons why there has to be a cap. There has to be a cap. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, I have Stanford Brown.
Lights are a lot better tonight. I come here tonight not on behalf, but on behalf of myself and my children, who you see here with a couple of very well-used etch a sketches, not knowing whether or not you intend to vote tonight to postpone, or vote tonight to pass the proposal, the grade 1 assignment plan intact, or to perhaps reshape it a bit and pass it, or whatever other options. But, so that's my preface. Last night I was there, like 300 other people, and tonight I see a lot of those stakeholders, but I'd like to draw your attention to the 2 stakeholders in row 3. The prior speaker mentioned the 15-year-old. I'll see your 15-year-old and raise you 2 5-year-olds who are really what this is all about. It's the future. It's not 8-year-olds, 10 or 12-year-olds. It's the 5, 4, 3, 2-year-olds and so forth. And this proposal dramatically affects them. As you can gather, I'm a proponent of language immersion programs. I sought out this program coming out here in late January for kindergarten night. I met with, I met for the first time Superintendent Gormley, some of the principals, many other people, fabulous presentation. We went home convinced that based on what we were told, we should move here. And what we were told was, don't worry, no, not don't worry. Everybody who wants into the French program gets in. We just don't guarantee which school. And that was confirmed by 2 or 3 different people, not that just that night, but in subsequent telephone conversations before we headed the car east. Now we find that that's not the case. And while they're thriving now in Collicott Kindergarten with 2 fabulous teachers, I'm extremely worried about next September. So I'm extremely dismayed that I have to be worried about next September, given the assurances that I gave. And believe me, if I didn't have those assurances, I would never have come east. Just never would have. Certainly not for an English program, even one as fine as the one that Milton Public Schools has. Secondly, this proposal, I'm dismayed by this proposal that calls for a cap and lottery, but really it's a slash the enrollment, French immersion enrollment, and then a cap on a lottery. And it falls distressingly in a draconian fashion on the kindergarten class. And then that apparently establishes the cap of some 20-25% reduction. I 8 classes times 26, 156 from the current, I don't know how many French immersion students in the first grade, but it's draconian. And it just stuns me. In addition to that, I'm mortified by the fact that I'm now finding myself pitted against some of my fellow language immersion people who many of them sounded off last night about sibling preference. Can't blame them. You know, it's a great deal for them. Not so great for my kids, who are the oldest in our family. But I'm finding myself, you know, pitted against my own comrades, so to speak. And that just, I can't believe that would be the intention of this. So at this point, what I'd like to propose is to, if not setting aside your proposal altogether for another time and enrolling, you know, some citizen groups to really sit around a table, sleeves rolled up, lots of water, and really pitch in to try and craft a better, you know, document, a better plan, then at least take on, even tonight or maybe next week, take on the effort. Try harder. I know you tried hard. God knows Superintendent Gormley tried hard. All of you have, the leadership committees. But as you saw last night, most of us don't think you've tried hard enough. At this point, at minimum, please consider reshaping this document to either exempt out the kindergarten class altogether from the cap. If you have to, pass the cap and lottery proposal, but exempt the kindergarten class. At the same time, that buys you some time to let that fabulous STEM initiative work its wonders. It has the tremendous potential to siphon off a lot of the so-called fence sitters that would otherwise might go in the French program, might go into English. And by doing that, you organically would add to the English program the pool for role model candidates for co-taught, and so forth.
You've gone a little over, so I'd like you to try
Yeah,
to wrap
well,
up.
the other guy went a little under. So then yeah, he was south of 3. Let me just go through. Yeah, thanks a lot. So the other thing would be allow our French groups. We really want to participate in the pool. We really, really want to in the pool for role model candidates. Let us take some of our ideas about our round robin ability to get into that program, and thereby also alleviate the perceived crisis or the real crisis in the small pool for the co-taughts. Lastly, I would say that that you know it's really it's really
Come on.
okay. Yeah, 3 minutes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next is Jim Mulligan.
Hello again.
Mr. Chair, point of order.
Yeah.
Just so this doesn't get contentious, either we have a time limit or we don't.
Yeah. Right.
So if we're going to, if people can talk as long as they want, I'm okay with that.
Do you have a noise on that we can put on?
I can put a noise on.
Yeah, why don't we do that?
If it's
Make
3
it,
minutes, it's 3 minutes.
give it a,
I promise to be under 3 minutes.
an obnoxious noise. It's an iPhone, it has lots of obnoxious noises, okay.
Jim Mulligan, 432 Elliott Street. I've sat through the meetings, minus one since July. I've listened to the ideas about the pilot STEM. I've listened to Dr. O'Dwyer's presentation. I've listened to the presentations. I've come to listen to pretty much every meeting, except for one, like I said, and I would urge you tonight to bring this to a conclusion, vote. This doesn't need to be dragged on anymore, in my opinion. I think that the process has been there. There was opportunities for people to speak at every meeting. I listened to the presentation the last meeting and waited out a lot of other subjects to have my say at 11:15 at night. So my opinion about this is I support the superintendent's plan. I don't want to see a sibling preference, and I'd like to see a vote. I think this is dragged on long enough. Thank you.
Next, I have Nikkei Bradshaw.
Good evening, Nikkei Bradshaw, 127 Craig Street. I'll be really brief. I attended the meeting last night and heard a number of concerns voiced by members of the Milton Public School community and beyond. I heard a lot of people speak passionately about their family situation and what was important to them. I heard some thoughts which required additional reflection, so tonight I'd like to briefly share two thoughts. First, I appreciated one speaker's interpretation that French immersion was a gift that she wants to give her children. I completely agree. Most parents and guardians want to give their children an amazing gift. When I get my daughter out of bed, provide her for her basic needs, food and clothing, I drive her to school and I give her a gift of an education. I heard individuals both in favor and opposed to the CAP agree that both programs were good options. The English program is a great gift. The French immersion program is a great gift. I chose the gift through the English program, and some others choose to give a gift through the French immersion. We all give our children a gift of an education. But let's not forget that the Milton Public School System is a public school system, and we have laws that govern how we do school. The government and the public schools in Massachusetts have a moral obligation and a constitutional duty to provide all of Massachusetts children with the skills necessary to become productive members of our societies. These skills, according to the law, include literacy in the English language as the most important. Therefore, it is resolved, and this is a quote, all children in Massachusetts public schools shall be taught English as rapidly and as effectively as possible. That's the law. So while we are entitled to give a gift of an education, we are only fortunate that the Milton Public School System provides another option that allows us to choose which program we want to offer as a gift. The proposed cap will ensure the sustainability of the French immersion, co-taught, and English programs in our public school system so that we will continue to have the option to choose. Secondly, there was a discussion about straddle families and sibling preferences. And as a parent, I can identify with the desire to fight for what you want for your own child. However, it is unclear to me why one family's hopes and dreams are more valuable than another family's hopes and dreams. From a legal perspective, if having a weighted lottery to account for gender or other demographics is not advisable, why would a family of 4 receive greater preference than a family of 1 just because they have already entered the system? I just don't understand. If my neighbor has a family of 5 and determined that the oldest child's learning style was better served with the gift of an English program education, then her current kindergartner must stand at the back of the line in the lottery process because you gave your oldest the gift of French immersion? If I could only conceive 1 child and you conceive 3, your family's hopes and dreams are more valuable than mine because you currently have a child in the French immersion program, and I don't? Last sentence. If my oldest child has special needs and her IEP indicates her participation in the co-taught program, then her younger brother is at a disadvantage because our family's gene pool is different? I just don't understand. If you choose the gift of the English program, you check the box that says English program. If you choose the gift of the French immersion, you enter the lottery and get in line and wait like all the other families that have a similar hope and dream for their children. Thank you.
Next, we have Andrea Sinnott.
Thank you. It's much more comfortable to sit. We had a chance yesterday to talk about the plan for quite a while, and I thought that was very helpful, but I still am stuck on questions about how this thing will actually work and whether the way that it works is achieves the goal within a reasonable time or swings too far in the opposite direction. And you heard my views on some of aspects of that yesterday. I'm still stuck on the lottery itself. So, for example, if 54 kids try for 52 spots at Cunningham and 2 don't get into French, but 50 kids try for 52 spots at Collicott and there are 2 open spots, my understanding in the plan is those Cunningham kids would not be eligible to go into the 2 open Collicott spots. And I think if that scenario doesn't happen this first year, there's a relatively good chance that those scenarios could play out in future years. I will say, I think if it happens this year, there are going to be a lot of legitimately angry parents. Also, on the math question, so I think it's not 182 spots system-wide that we're talking about because, again, the program adds a very new element of a unwavering commitment to the homeschool. There are sort of 3 new legs: the cap, lack of sibling preference, and an unwavering commitment to the homeschool. When we moved to Milton, Mary Gormley and I had a telephone conversation, and Glover that year had 26 kids who wanted French who couldn't get into it, and they were thinking about a 3rd class. They didn't do that. But the English program was also full there. So I have a real question of, if you try for the French lottery and you don't get in, and English is full as well, what's going to happen then? I think these are real issues for parents. They're not just details. And I think that if the committee isn't clear on how these things are going to play out, then you're not ready for a vote today, that the plan has not been thought through in enough detail to allow a vote today. I also have questions about whether your goal is to achieve the reshuffling of English with those 20 additional families in the first year, or is it one that you would say that by year 2 or 3 you've achieved that goal? Because as I sort of play the math, well, let me step back. Every year we've been in Milton, the assignment plan has changed, and that creates a lot of angst and uncertainty. So when I look at this plan, I want to try and understand what happens in year 1, but then what happens in year 2, 3, or 4, or are we still in a scenario that it will be shifting every year? Because I think that creates a tremendous amount of anxiety. So as I've sort of talked about that scenario with various people, what would you pick? I think there are a lot of pressures into English, and I worry that this plan is overreaching, and I think if you're not clear on that, you shouldn't be voting on it today.
Thank you. Next, I have Matt King.
Hi, I'm Matt King, 35 Revere Street. I'm not here tonight to ask you to vote no. I agree completely with the motivation behind the proposal, as I think you all know. I am here to ask you to consider one last time the grandfather clause for current kindergarten students with siblings. As I stated last night, these students are aware of their surroundings. They are aware of their older siblings' education. They have modeled what they're expecting from that. You cannot tell me that you know for sure that they will get over it and be okay. We can hope that they will, but you can't tell me that. Our families were not given enough advance warning of this change. I literally, in the beginning of the summer, I sat down with Mary and I came away thinking, well, there's no way they would ask us at this late date to tell our kids. It just seemed inconceivable. So the summer went on, and we couldn't give meaningful feedback until the proposal was made on October 3rd. So, you know, it's hard to argue against something that doesn't exist. The proposal didn't exist until the 3rd. You don't have to do this to achieve the goals that you're trying to accomplish. This is extra, and you don't have to do it.
Next, I have Jennifer Renz.
Jennifer Renz, 48 Walnut Street. First and foremost, a big thank you for keeping things civil and fair at last night's meeting. That was a difficult meeting for many reasons, but your format was, I feel, very balanced to allow everyone that wanted a chance to speak the ability to do so. I am asking all of you tonight to not delay the vote on this cap one day more and to make no amendments to it. The Milton Public Schools represent all children in all grades and in all schools. The cap will ensure that all children will be placed in educationally sound classrooms, classrooms that are balanced, fair, equitable, and most importantly, sustainable. It is critical that the vote takes place tonight with no changes so that this school system can move forward to set up parameters so that the disaster that happened to this year's first grade enrollment process never happens again. I would also like to reiterate what a few parents spoke to last night concerning the English program. During these past 2 weeks, this program has been raked through the mud by a few individuals with children that have yet to enter the Milton Public Schools, and by a few individuals who have never stepped foot into an English classroom. The ignorant and hateful comments on social media sites has been unbearable to me, and I am quite frankly ashamed of what my hometown has turned into and hope that healing can come soon. I have no doubt in my mind that my 3 children are going to leave Glover Elementary School in 4 to 5 years with not only a strong academic experience, but more importantly, a strong sense of empathy for all children. I think a few members of this community need an education in this. In closing, I would like to thank Superintendent Gormley, Assistant Superintendent Phelan, and all members of the school committee in making sure all of Milton's public school children receive the best education they possibly can. I am eager to see the cap implemented tonight and implemented the way Superintendent Gormley proposed. Thank you.
All right, those are the people who have signed up for Citizen Speak. Do we have any other people who are interested in Citizen Speak beyond this one? We have 5. What is the will of the committee on this? 5?
I'd rather hear than not,
5 of you who raised your hands.
but that's it.
What?
In lieu of after.
Yeah, in lieu of after, we'll do this now. Why don't you come on up?
5, no more.
Hi, my name is Anna Grech. I live at 285 Brush Hill Road, and I have never been to a school committee meeting before. And I wasn't here last night because I'm actually a physician and I had to be at the hospital until very late at night. But I have been following the issue about what we're all discussing here today, the issue of the French cap with or without sibling preference. So I think I would like to use myself as an example and try to sort of use my time to illustrate other solutions or opportunities that may be existent for us here. So first of all, I don't know why our community is divided over this. I think that it's much better that we come together to find solutions rather than try to be, pitted against each other. Just from my perspective, so I am a scientist at Harvard Medical School. I'm a professor at Harvard Medical School and a doctor at Mass General. And I don't have a lot of, time to be involved in sort of PTO activities oftentimes. But what I have done for Milton Public Schools is, last year I went into, my son is a 3rd grader at Tucker. I went in and did a science project with the entire 2nd grade, hands-on for 2 days. I plan to do it again this year. I have a kindergartner now in Tucker as well, and I will do it for as many classes as I can. I also accepted a Milton High School student into my laboratory at Harvard Medical School to do research this past summer. This is my commitment to Milton Public Schools, and I can bring something that perhaps, not everyone can offer, but it's something that I can offer, and I would like to bring to the enrichment of children, all children at Milton. That has no preference over, English or French program, obviously. Now, I stand here because I grew up bilingual. I grew up in Greece. I had parents who had the foresight to raise me bilingual, so I had the opportunity because of that to come to Harvard Medical School on scholarship. And I think that the ability to be bilingual offers you certain opportunities that I would like to be able to offer my children. This is the reason I moved to Milton. My son, Dimitri, is in the French immersion program. He's actually trilingual. He speaks Greek, English, and French. And, you know, I would like, of course, to have the same opportunity for his brother. I think it is only fair. The third grade class at Tucker is an unusual class. As we all know, many students were moved from all across town to go to Tucker in order to attend the French immersion program. That shows the commitment of our families in that class, and it's very evident throughout the school, the community that we're building, because everybody's so invested in children's education and in the bilingual proposal or aspect of pursuing education. So that is wonderful that we've been able to build that, and I think if we would move forward with this proposal, and again, you know, members of the audience here encouraging us to vote now so that it's done, and that we, you know, I don't think that's necessarily the best way to come together as a community, but rather it's best to discuss and move forward with what is the best plan for everyone involved so that no one will be disappointed. Perhaps we can find such a solution. Again, I think that, you know, the way to do it is not to vote on that tonight. Sibling preference is something that I feel very strongly about because of my particular family parameters, but I also feel as a Tucker family that especially because of what we call the bubble year for this third year class at Tucker, when so many families were moved to the Tucker school to attend French, that these families essentially made that move with the assumption that they're getting French and that the siblings would be getting French, and I think that that is something that would be really very difficult for families to accept as sort of the implicit agreement that we had 3 years ago about this. So I find that that would be very hard to change or violate at this time, and very difficult for a lot of families to accept. I think that if we move forward with a hasty vote, what we will do is divide our community further, and I don't think that that would be to the interests of Milton. So I propose that we think again about what the best solutions are, keeping people like me involved in the school system so that we can gain the best for all of the students in Milton. Thank you for your attention.
Good evening. My name is Catherine King, and I wanted to say thank you to Superintendent Gormley, Assistant Superintendent John Phelan, and the members of the school committee, and also the members of the World Language Committee. I had asked the question yesterday if anybody could do a quick tally of the number of hours that have been spent on this issue already. And again, I would hope that somebody would acknowledge that there has been many, many hours spent on it. I'm not going to be here for very long. I'm just going to say I'm actually supposed to be downstairs finding my inner artist right now, but my inner artist had to wait. I decided to stop by and to say that I think you should vote tonight, and I think you should vote in favor of the cap and the lottery. For the record, I have a son in 5th grade in the English program, and I have been upset by some of the comments that have been out there this past few weeks. Just a couple of things to the people who are upset at the idea that they moved here for the French immersion. I just want to say that you may have moved here for the French immersion, but I think that you will find that you will stay in Milton. You'll stay here because of its open spaces, because of its parks, because of its music program, because of its arts center, because of its library, and because of its overall education. You will find that you will stay here. You will love this town. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Hi. Good evening. My name is Brian Trutnick. I live at 69 Maryland Road. I'm new to this whole process. Last night was the first meeting I attended. I don't have kids in the program yet and was not aware of everything that was going on. So one thing that stood out to me, regardless of where I come out in this whole issue, is that there seems to be the argument for that grandfather clause. And so very quickly, I just want to say that regardless, I'm not going to get in between everybody here because I don't want to be in between all that. I think whether you vote for it or you vote against it, just keep fairness in mind. I'm here for my child and several children in my neighborhood who have not had the opportunity, whether through a lottery or through clear choice, to participate in the program. All I ask is you keep that availability open to me and to my children and to the rest of my neighborhood. Because if you do vote in favor of the grandfather clause, the IEP kids win. They have a larger pool of role models. The school wins because they satisfy whatever all these different requirements and issues are. The school, the kids that have already in the French immersion program win, they already had the option to take it, and the kids with siblings automatically have a choice in. The person who loses is the kid who has not had that opportunity yet. So that's it. I just ask you to please consider fairness and consider not implementing the grandfather clause.
My name is Carol Seidman, and I live at 64 Pagoda Circle, and I'm sorry that we all have to talk about this again, but I do want to respond to a few things that I heard, just very, very briefly. One is, I do have a question about this neighborhood school and why that's such a big deal. And if that was taken out of the proposal, would that make the numbers different? I ask that because I live in the Collycott district, but my kids go to Tucker, even though I live closer to Tucker than I do to Collycott because of all the redistricting. And all my neighbors take the bus, my kids' neighbors take the bus to Collycott, except for one group who now go to Glover. So this notion of a neighborhood school, I truly believe is a notion. And it's really not happening because people are choosing to move across town if there's a program over there, et cetera, et cetera. So I do urge you to consider or reconsider thinking about taking that off the table if it helps solve the problem. If it doesn't, then so be it. It really doesn't matter. But I heard somebody say that that was a tripod of the plan, and I urge you to consider maybe just taking that one part out at this point. I do know that it does help to have a decision for people, and I just want to reiterate again, wholeheartedly, that people, I'm so happy that this discussion happened in some ways, so that people really understand that Einstein and several of his peers would need an IEP to go to the French program. He had severe ADHD and language processing issues. There are many like him. So to this whole peer role model, I really want you to consider the wording of this and whether or not we're creating, for a lack of a better word, too strict tracks and not really looking at the whole child and their intelligences in the varied ways. I know there are many parents in the French program, including myself, paying out of pocket for occupational therapy, for other issues that need support but are not provided in the French program. Thank you very much. Good luck with your vote.
Hi, I'm Karen Viveros, 50 Woodland Road. I'm a parent of a Milton High Schooler, Pierce Middle Schooler, and Cunningham Schooler. Thank you for the forum last night to discuss the proposed cap on French immersion. I completely support the school committee and administration's cap proposal and urge you to vote tonight. Enrollment needs to be controlled at a manageable level. A 50-50 or close to it French-English split is fair. And the lottery would also help mitigate the us versus them mentality that pervades the elementary schools. For those that say to wait for the STEM program to more fully develop, I have to say, why wait? If people choose English, then there will be no need for the cap in those years. This is not an elimination of the program. It is an insurance policy that should have been in the original design of the French immersion program to begin with. If parents complain that their child will be a loser in the lottery or will be devastated if they don't get French, I say life is full of disappointments and change, and parenting is about teaching your child to handle those changes and disappointments. As for sibling preference, while I understand it might be inconvenient to not have your child in the same program, it should not be devastating or considered a second-best alternative to be in the traditional English program. Plenty of people balance children in different programs in different schools. People say they sent their child to Milton Public Schools for the French program. I could say I sent my child to Milton High for the high number of AP classes they offer, and if they change that number before he gets to his senior year, should I expect the schools to hold off change because it's not convenient for me or isn't what I wanted? No, that would be ludicrous. I appreciate the difficult decision you have before you. I think that capping the French immersion enrollment is a responsible educational policy. Thanks.
All right. So we will move on.
I think there's one more. Wasn't that 5?
Was it?
I think
I
that
thought
there-
there
oh,
were
I'm
5.
sorry. Oh.
I thought there were 5.
I'm sorry. I didn't.
Good evening, and I will keep this brief. Thank you very much for all the time and effort that you've put into this process. I know it's been a long haul. I don't envy your position, but I respect what you're doing, and hopefully will do tonight via the vote to cap the French immersion program with no sibling preference. You know, this vote is not a matter of the have and those who have not on irrelevant issues. People obviously are invested in that. But this vote is about offering each and every student in the Milton Public Schools a world-class education. Beyond special education needs, this allows me the ability to still have a choice. And I urge you that no sibling preference be given. The reality is families do not fall apart once one child enrolls in English and the other in French. I invite you into my home, not tonight because it's a mess, but although I know firsthand. Although some have spoken about sibling expectations, parents need to set the expectation. That's my job. It's the parent's responsibility to say that to the child that it's okay that you didn't get an opportunity in French because you will have another great opportunity within the school district or within your school. Sibling discord is really just that of the parents, and really an anomaly of a child. I've heard of a few instances, but not really. It's usually what I've heard is it comes from the parents. It is a myth. It's a myth that it's perpetuated to serve the needs of a few. I'm not going to speak French, but Voltaire said, "The best is the enemy of good." You cannot delay the vote thinking that you can perfect the cap in the lottery. People will be upset either way, and I do not envy your position, but again, I respect your commitment to sustaining all of the programs. Thank you. And it's Linda Cooper, 47 Rose Street. I got it that time.
All right. So we will move on with our agenda. 2 quick items to the approval of the minutes. Let's get those out of the way, and then we'll move straight into the grade 1 assignment plan. So, minutes of August 15th.
Make a motion to move?
Second.
Moved by Ms. Sheridan, second by Mr. Walker. Any comments, corrections, additions, amendments? No? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? That's unanimous. And minutes of September 5th.
So move?
Second?
Moved by Ms. Sheridan, second by Ms. Bagley Jones. Any, again, comments, corrections? Seeing none. All those in favor? That's unanimous as well. So we move on. We have reversed this tonight to do the chairman's report before the superintendent's report because grade 1 school assignment comes up under this one, so we'll get right to it. Last night, we had several hundred people in Milton High School auditorium. I couldn't begin to guess how many were there, but it was quite the crowd. We had a very good evening of questions and statements and people's expressing their opinions, and we stayed until 3.5 hours, and everyone was too tired to ask any more questions. But it was good because I think people got to say what they needed to say. I don't think anyone was shut out of the evening. And so we heard a lot. We sat here and listened a lot. We didn't obviously discuss because we were leaving that up for everybody else to be heard last night. So tonight, we need to walk through this ourselves and decide how it is we're going to play this one forward. I would just mention briefly, at the beginning of last night, I mentioned a couple of parameters that we work within. Many people who are here tonight were here last night, but some watching on TV or watching this at 3 in the morning on Channel 8 might not have. So let me just reiterate very quickly. We work under a couple of basic parameters that are legal issues. Ms. Bradshaw referred to one earlier on. In 2002, the English language learners law was revised by the legislature in the face of a citizen's petition, but nonetheless they did it. And what it did was to eliminate what was then the system of bilingual education, which were students who were for whom English was not a first language, were often placed in classes with a bilingual teacher taught in that language with the intent that they would not fall behind in their studies while they were learning English. The issue at the time arose was that there was a lot of claims that people were staying too long in bilingual education and not getting fluent in English. And there was an initiative petition that would have just straight out eliminated bilingual education in Massachusetts. And so the legislature rewrote the English language learners law in the face of that petition. That put a couple of strictures on us, and that's why I mentioned this just to remind people. As it was quoted earlier, English language learners, people whose language is not, first language is not English, can have a limited amount of time in a bilingual setting under certain circumstances, but have to move very quickly now into English. And they have to be taught English, and they have to be taught in English, and they have to be taught in an English class with native English speakers. So it's not just that we have to offer English for people who don't speak English. We have to offer English classes sufficiently large with people who do speak English as a native language to incorporate those English language learners into it. That's a legal requirement. As part of that same law, they mandated that English is really the language of instruction in Massachusetts, and the consequence of that is that also anyone who wants their child educated in English has to have their child educated in English. We can't say, we don't have enough room in the English class, we'd like you to take French. If they say, I want English, they get English, because that's a right under the law. And the third piece I mentioned last night was for certain students who are on either an IEP, an individualized education plan under the special education laws, or under a so-called 504 plan under the Americans with Disabilities Act. These people have a contract with the school department as to what the disability of their child is and how the school is going to address that. It's an annualized contract. It's renewed every year, and the terms and conditions of it are exactly that. They're a contract. And as I mentioned last night, when you have a 6-year-old who has been diagnosed with a learning disability, chances are it was language-based. Not always, but it is somewhat the case. And in that case, many parents say, I would like my child to be educated in English. And again, as a consequence of anyone who asks gets it, whereas we normally, in some sense, negotiate's probably too strong a word, but we do work out the details of an individualized education plan or a 504 plan. That's not negotiable because of the law. So, and again, special education students, not just those in the co-taught classroom. As I mentioned last night, there are 1 in 7 children in our district have either an IEP or a 504 plan. It covers a lot of ground. And relatively few of them are in co-taught classes. The majority of them are mainstreamed. We have an obligation to put these children in the least restrictive environment, which is to say we don't have classes set aside for them where they're taught by themselves. They have to be integrated into classes, and they can't be, integration is real integration. It's not, 18 children on IEPs and 504s and 2 children without them. I mean, it has to be true integration into a classroom. So we have a legal obligation to offer a certain amount of English. That obligation will vary a little bit from year to year, depending on the populations, depending how many people request English, depending how many people are English language learners or on 504s or IEPs that particular year, but it is an obligation. So that being said, given that we have a certain amount of students, and it's not really classrooms, it's students, we have to have students in those classrooms that have to be in English, that does de facto limit the number of students who go into French. I mean, if we have to have so many students in English, we only have so many students. And as I said, this is an issue we've never had to face because we've never had the demand for French that we've had in the last couple of years, where we've actually approached or even exceeded, for temporarily at least, the number of students that we could realistically put into French without affecting the English program. So I mentioned that last night. I mentioned again tonight in case other folks are listening, but those are the parameters under which we are working. We've had a lot of discussion on this. We've received many emails. We've read many emails. We've replied to many emails. And I thank everybody for taking the time to write those emails and contacting us and staying for 3.5 hours last night and getting up again for Citizen Speak tonight and being here tonight and contacting everyone you've contacted, because we do need the input of the public on this. But ultimately, we have some decisions we have to make. We have to figure out what it is we are going to do. As was mentioned last night, also the new STEM program in the English draws a certain amount of uncertainty into this, because we don't know what the effects of that will be, whether that will draw more people into the English program, and whether it will render this entire discussion moot. We don't know that. It would be nice if it did, but we'll see what happens when that plays out. But in the meantime, we are approaching another year of choosing first grade classes for people coming up in a few months. And I believe it's in the best interest of everyone to know what they're looking at when that comes forward. That we know what our policies are going to be, what our plan's going to be. So with that, as far as how we should approach this, there are several ways we can do this. This is a large issue and has a lot of tendrils to it, and it's easy to wander off into various different directions. We could try to attack it as a whole and discuss it as a whole, or we could try to take it in pieces and try to limit our discussion on certain pieces. I leave that to the committee. I mean, we could just start by saying that should there be, we could, just as a suggestion, as a policy statement, put out as a first motion on the floor that should there be insufficient seats in English, the superintendent has the authority to cap French. I mean, that is a policy statement that somehow or other is implicit in this. Whether we want it to be separate or we want it to be part of a large package, I don't care. But I'm just trying to frame the discussion in some sense so that we have a way to talk about this without sort of wandering all over creation. So I'm open to suggestions from anyone who has a way they'd like to.
Question?
Go right ahead.
We're not having another presentation, but you're going to answer questions that we might have? Okay, thank you. Your pleasure.
Oh, yes. We're more than happy to have you answer questions on this. So how would you like to begin? Yes, Ms. Kelly.
Well, we have a student assignment plan. I think, and that's a policy, it belongs in our policy book. I think we could entertain voting the concepts around what changes we would like to see happen, if indeed we want them to happen. But I think eventually it has to end up as a written policy so that anyone can pick it up and understand how do things get done in the Milton Public Schools. What has been presented thus far is not in that format. And so I think there's really two steps to this. My hope is that tonight we can talk about the concept, and if there's agreement, we could take a vote on the concept, and then it would be referred to the policy subcommittee for language that would capture that in the policy.
Sounds reasonable, especially to those of us who are not on the policy subcommittee.
We might have some openings for that committee.
That sounds,
Acceptable way to proceed?
Sure.
So why don't we start with the biggest policy first, which is the whole issue of a cap in general. So the concept is that if there are insufficient students enrolled in the French, in the English program to meet the needs that are required of that program, that we would have a cap on the French program so that enough students would be enrolled in English. So that's sort of the basis of this whole thing.
Well, just so I'm clear, the superintendent has what's called a grade 1 assignment plan that she's presented, correct? So are we talking about that in pieces, or are we talking about that as a whole?
I think it might help to discuss it in pieces, because there are a lot of pieces to it, but if you want to discuss it as a whole, you can discuss it. I don't control this committee.
I'm fine either way, but I don't know what the pieces are if we're going to discuss it in pieces.
Well, I think the first...
She's proposed an approach to grade 1 assignments. So either we like that plan or we don't. But if you can articulate for me what the pieces are, I'm happy to discuss it in pieces.
I think my thought was that the first piece was the entire notion of a cap in the first place. I think there are certain things I think we have to get over before we can talk about what a lottery would, if we don't agree there's a cap, there's no reason to talk about a lottery. So I'm just trying to sequence this a little bit so we don't discuss things that we end up not having to discuss if we go that way or whatever. I mean, I think it makes sense to try to not quite linearize this, but somehow take it in some sort of sequential order.
And are you anticipating a separate vote on each one of those pieces?
Well, I think what Ms. Kelly was talking about was sort of a sense of what we approve, and that in terms of amending the policy. We're trying to give guidelines to the policy subcommittee.
Well, what I interpret, and Ms. Kelly, you can certainly speak for yourself, but she and I had a conversation about that. I think what that means is that if we approve the approach that the superintendent has recommended, then you'll need a little more detail, a little more flowery language that looks like a policy to make it fit in our policy manual. But I didn't interpret that to mean that there were separate pieces that we needed to vote on or discuss and vote on.
Well, I mean, I think there are components of the plan. If we want to just say, does everyone agree with the superintendent in terms of the plan that's been proposed in all its entirety, we certainly can do it that way. It still requires a step to turn into policy as you've described. If we believe there might be some discussion or a consensus would need to be built upon some component of the plan, then that's where I think that Chairman Pavlicek's idea of talking about the individual components. The biggest one, of course, is sibling, right? So is that something that we would want to discuss separately, or do we want to talk about the whole policy or the whole proposal in its entirety as it stands? And I think that's really where we're at. But whichever way we decide, it still requires a step of implementing it into a policy.
Ms. Bagley-Jones.
I think what I would say is that I see it as two issues. There's a cap, and then there's, do we change the tiered lottery to a lottery without sibling preference and keep the Milton Public School kindergarten in there too? So to me, we could talk about them separately, we could vote on them separately, but I think they're intertwined, and I think we should just talk about them and not talk about how we're going to talk about them. And if we vote, we don't have to talk about how we're going to vote. We can decide to vote or not to vote after we talk about them and ask Ms. Gormley and Mr. Phelan some questions. I didn't mean to be facetious in that, I really didn't mean
No.
that. Sorry.
Ms. Sherry?
I think this is evidence of the fact that none of us have talked about this offline, and, that's why we know, we're not really sure what the best procedure is to go forward, and I think that this is good for us to venture into this. I think it is good. I agree that we should probably just agree to cap or not to cap, and then take them separately. That would be my suggestion as well, and if there are other ideas that school committee members want to address or entertain, then those should be welcome as well.
Okay, I accept your invitation to talk about it. So here's where I am. I think that we need to accept the superintendent's approach as submitted with one potential modification. I am torn on sibling preference. I think that I heard some compelling arguments for last night, some compelling arguments against. I've been thinking about it for a while. There's 25 years of tradition in that regard. But I think the most compelling case is that for the 2012-2013 kindergarten parents, the argument that they only heard the specifics about the removal of sibling preference a few weeks ago is a pretty compelling argument. So I might be in favor of allowing sibling preference for 2012-2013 and then eliminating it after that.
Bagley Jones.
In terms of, I guess we're going to talk about the sibling piece first. In terms of the sibling piece, I feel very badly for the straddle families. I mean, I feel your pain, all of you there, all of you at home. I feel very badly about it. And I do agree that, and as a member of the World Language Committee, we didn't talk about straddle families per se, but we talked a lot about SIBs, but we also talked about the oldest and the only, as other parents have too, and that's a real quandary as well. So, and I'm torn about sibling preference as well. However, if we say that we're not going to, that we're going to have sibling preference for this year only, I have 2 kids. I have my third. No, I don't have my third. I really have 2 kids, but I'm another parent, and I have 3 kids. I have 4 kids. I have an oldest in 2nd grade French immersion. I have a kid in kindergarten right now. They get into French immersion under sibling preference. I have a 3rd kid coming along. Where does that kid go? When do we cut it off? And
Well,
can I finish?
yeah, that's the difficulty.
We can't say, okay, folks, we're going to let you in your 2nd child now, but in 2 years, your 3rd child, too bad, you're out of luck.
Sure
We'll
we
be
can.
right back where we are again.
Sure we can.
Well, can I finish? I know from being a very active Milton School parent, I'd be the first one back here with my 3rd kid saying, what do you mean you're not going to let my 3rd kid in? So maybe we just understand that we're going to say it as clearly as we can, and we're going to say for this, let's say, for this year only this sibling is going to get in, and too bad if you have 3 more. That's going to be a very hard thing for the next school committee to maintain that, and very difficult on the school administration. So I have some concerns about that. We've gotten emails, or at least I know have, about folks that have a preschooler. Okay, do we let them in? We've gotten emails, and people tonight and the other night talked about they don't have kids old enough to be in French immersion, so do the onlys and the oldest not get the same treatment as a sibling? So I'm really caught with it. I see both sides. But I'm not quite there where you're at yet in terms of maintaining the sibling preference. I'm saddened by it, but I'm not there yet.
Ms. Patera.
Yeah, I'm equally saddened. I think that it's a tough thing to look at people, and some families are different than others, and that's just the bottom line. Some families that wouldn't bother at all, and some families it's really important. However, I feel this class is tough because it's late in the game, and I totally understand where they're coming from. But the fact is, the sibling priority we've had in the past wasn't French students get a priority for their sibling French student. It was you were kept in the same school if you had any sibling, English, co-taught, or French. And so you'd have to, if you're going to have a grandfathering rule, then it would be grandfathering all those kids, which basically excludes all other students if they all sign up for French from the programs, if you look at the numbers of siblings in the kindergarten classes. And if you're putting in a lottery and you want to exude this fairness without weighting it, then you're not really having a fair lottery, because you're giving people almost no chance that are coming into the program. So it's a lot of people talked about fairness and, you know, that they feel like it is fair and describe more of what is fair. I feel that because our policies in the past have had siblings in schools, it was a different policy, and it is a change. It also reduces the chance of having mixing our groups as much as we wanted, because siblings are somewhat similar. I think also the bottom line is, if you give a preference, you're giving a guarantee, where if you don't give a preference, you're giving a still extremely good chance they're going to get into French for everyone. Whereas if you give a preference, you're giving a guarantee to one group and excluding another group, which I can't feel that it's fair.
Sure.
I think it would be helpful to have some data from Superintendent Gormley, if you have that, Ms. Gormley, just to help us understand what those numbers would be like in terms of how many children currently enrolled in, you know, if we were to consider, you know, allowing it for this year, what the enrollment is like in terms of siblings currently in the kindergarten program.
I think I have.
And we had also talked about where the cutoff would be, you know. Would it be someone who had an older sibling all the way up to high school, or do we cut it off at the elementary school? How do we do that?
What I prepared for you today is, and as Ms. Padera said, in past years, if you had siblings in the English or the French. So what Ms. Barrett prepared for you today, our registrar, is looking at the current kindergartners and figuring out how many of those children have siblings in next year through the 5th grade. Because that's really the grade cutoff that we've used. You didn't ask me for this, you didn't ask me for through middle and high school, so this is what, when we were working in the office today, we requested. And then how many sets of twins in each current kindergarten. So for the viewing audience, there are 91 Collycott kindergartners, 38 have siblings, 18 of those are in French, 20 are in English, and there are 3 sets of twins. Cunningham, 85 kindergartners, 37 siblings. Those 37 are made up of 19 in French and 18 in English, 2 sets of twins. Glover, 84 kindergartners, 38 siblings, 25 in French, 13 in English, no twins. And Tucker, 64 kindergartners, 27 siblings, 16 of them in French, 11 in English, 1 set of twins.
Sure.
So just to follow up on that, Ms. Gormley, the students that have come through, as we just said, if you had a sibling, then you had preference. We don't have a sense of how many of these siblings in English might choose French. I mean, that's information we don't have available.
Oh.
So if we look at Tucker, for example, and we say there are 27 siblings, 16 of them are currently in French.
Yep, the siblings are French, yes.
Right. Then, right. Then if all of the students, kindergarten students with siblings chose French immersion, that wouldn't allow anyone else into the French immersion class.
Can you say that last thing again? I'm not sure if...
So there are 27 students that are currently in kindergarten at Tucker that have siblings in the schools, in Tucker School. So either 16 of them are in French and 11 are in English. So if all of those 27 students, whether your older sibling was in French or English, chose French next year, we would be over by one student in our French program. That wouldn't allow anyone new to come into Tucker French immersion next year. Is that correct?
Yes.
And we could play that out for the other two schools. So Collycott has 38 siblings, and obviously this is the extreme, saying everyone who is a sibling in English would choose would choose French as well. But we have heard from plenty of parents who have said that they had, maybe chosen English for their first child, but French for their second child. I'm just trying to play this out. So if there are 38 children with siblings in Collycott, we have 50, I'm sorry?
14 remaining seats.
Right, we would have 14 remaining seats for Collycott Elementary School. And obviously, this isn't a perfect scenario, because not all those people will choose French for their families, but I think it's worth considering. And I also would like to comment on the twins now. I don't know if you want to take that separately, but
Go ahead.
I would strongly be in favor of saying that twins should enter as a pair, and that if the parents choose English or the parents choose French, that they should be able to have both of their twins should be received as a set.
Anything else on this? Yes, go ahead.
I don't know if this isn't really a question, but Ms. Gormley, I would really, I have the utmost respect for you, and yet I'm always willing to disagree with you if I need to, right, Ms. Gormley? Yes. But I know what an advocate you've been for the French immersion program and the English program. I mean, you're our educational leader, you have. We have looked at so many examples. We hear from parents about other suggestions. It's not like, yeah, we already did that. We really do want to hear from parents, but a lot of the things we have already talked about. Can you think of anything else that we haven't done, that's something we could compromise on, some other plan that you haven't vetted, that you just heard of, that you haven't looked at the pros and cons of? Is there anything else we can do? No pressure, but anything else? She's not making eye contact.
Again, a lottery and capping are difficult subjects, obviously, and the goal is not to divide people and to get by this, and just to, as I said at our meeting on the 3rd, I have to be responsible for all the children, and if we were all sitting here in March and the percentage went up and we didn't have a plan in place, that would be poor management of the school system. And so we're really reacting to parent choice and guaranteeing that we have really 3 outstanding elementary programs going ahead. We spent a tremendous amount of time. I know there were a lot of questions and people asked about the timing. We did the pros and cons. Mr. Failing can attest to that with the leadership team. And we really felt that this was the fairest. Was no plan, as you can see evidenced by the people, the parents and guardians who came forward tonight and last night. It's difficult, and there are difficult decisions.
Can I ask a follow-up
Go
question?
right ahead.
We have 14 grade 1 classrooms, or whatever, but we need to add a 15th one because of the kindergarten class. So we have 8 English slated and 6 French immersion slated, but we have 1 classroom left. You've said, well, depending on the needs of the system, that'll either be French immersion and English.
Yes.
Is there a way to say that can be French immersion?
If the parents, if the parents needed choice, that's why. Yeah, I'll give you an example, not to confuse everyone, but people have said, mentioned percentage. Well, you can't do percentage because you don't know what the enrollment's going to be every year, as one parent spoke to today, and you could have a class and a half. And so the schools are structured, the schools are built, they have these number of classrooms. That's why you're trying to come up with a plan that everyone can rely on, understand, and go forward. If the parents choose that, we, again, have said that will be a French immersion class.
It will be.
Yes.
For next year only.
For next year.
For next year.
For next year only.
For
If the
next year
parents-
only?
Yes.
What?
Because, well, the next year, we're going on the premise we're going to have the 14 classes. And then we have to determine every year what the needs of the district are. And so that, going forward, we're going forward with the premise that there will be 14 classes.
I don't mean to hug, but can I just ask one more question? So, one year, recently, we had one too many kindergarten classes at Cunningham, right?
Yes.
So we realized and we agreed that if there are 4 kindergarten classrooms, there'll be 4 grade 1 classes, so that if you
Yes.
go to kindergarten at one school, you do not have to go to another school. That was
Yes.
a compromise, that was educationally sound.
Yes.
So that's what you're doing with the 15th classroom. There's 4 kindergartens at Cunningham, even though it's meant for 3.
Yes.
But it's 4 this year, next year. It may not be 4 the year after.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to say, it may not be 4 the year after.
Absolutely.
It will depend on kindergarten enrollment. I mean, if the
Exactly.
kindergarten enrollment is high, there may be
Exactly.
a 15th class, an
right.
extra class of kindergarten. But because of space considerations, it
That's right.
wouldn't be at Cunningham,
Right.
most likely, because we don't have the space to bubble a class through every year. It would have to rotate somewhere else.
Right.
And that will change the dynamic as well, because what you might end up then, for instance, were it to be at Glover, you would be looking then at 3 classes at Tucker, 3 classes at Cunningham, 4 at Collycott, 5 at Glover. I mean, because that's when the bubble goes through, Glover becomes a 5. So the dynamic is very much a year-to-year dynamic in however we do this, because the system is going to be configured differently year to year if we have that 15th class for enrollment. I mean, we just don't have the 15th strand to permanently situate in one school.
Thank you.
Mr. Walker.
So I asked this question a few weeks ago, so I think I know the answer, but in that plan, each year in which there's a need to create a 15th kindergarten, the superintendent then has the authority to determine whether that first grade, which results from that additional kindergarten, will be French or English, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Dara.
So the requirement is 2 English classes, no single strands of English classes, but after that, if enrollment goes up, you have the discretion to decide, based on enrollment, whether it's going to be French or English. Correct?
Yes.
Ms. Kelly.
I've been on this committee for 10 years, and for
Congratulations.
over the years, I have often commented on sort of the uniqueness of the Milton Public Schools for many different reasons, but the fact that we're a school system that classroom sort of assignment is primarily determined by parent choice. And that over the years, when I first started, French versus English was 35-65. And in 10 years, we've gone totally the opposite. And from an educational perspective, I think this is the first administration that's taken on this challenge in a number of different years. With the World Language Committee 2 years ago, administrations before who were concerned about the same issues, not having balanced classrooms, basically weren't willing to take it on. And quite frankly, politically, 10 years ago, if you started talking about changes to French immersion, it was considered touching the third rail. So I can, as a community, I think this discussion is moving the system forward, and I can't thank the administration enough for taking it on. I believe we have to cap. Some of you have heard me in previous rants on this issue. I wish as a system we didn't have parents make choices at grade 1, that we waited until after grade 2, where being as creative and as talented as we are as a school district, we could make sure that all students have a great foundation and then have us branch off into our own programs if that's what the community wanted. I know I'm not going to get that tonight. I also have talked about the belief that French immersion classes for first grade at a class size of 26 is not educationally sound. And I wish that as part of this recommendation, we would bring that number down. And the reason I want to do that is not to deprive more people of being able to have the opportunity of joining the French program, but because not all kids in the first grade especially are able to basically operate in that kind of an environment. Not too many years ago, our goal across the board for all elementary first and second grades was we wanted class sizes of 22 or below. And we have gone very far away from that, and it concerns me from an educational perspective. My sense is I'm not going to get the rest of the committee to come down on that one either. When it comes to siblings, I feel very badly, because I believe it or not, I can remember when my kids were in preschool, and you weren't even connected to the public schools. You didn't really understand what was going on. You certainly weren't following it as intensely as you do once you become part of the community. And there is something to have a plan for your family. I mean, that's a real thing, and it will cause a situation that will need to be dealt with. But I'm a firm believer, again, I have been talking about unbalanced classrooms for a lot of years, that this is the only way, while still maintaining the option for French immersion to continue, that we can move the system forward. The one proposal that's been put on the table, the one aspect of it that I would like to perhaps revisit is how the whole percentages in terms of sister schools. If there was an opportunity to create a sister school environment where the chances of students getting into the seats that were available in French might be somehow more equitably distributed, I would be open to that. I think the superintendent had said that as this was evolving in the leadership team, that was one of the aspects that they were talking about. I would wonder whether the committee would be willing to revisit that. But absent that, I think this is the only way to move forward and maintain the great public school system that we have.
Go ahead. Oh, I didn't even see your hand.
That's okay.
Just whack me on the shoulder.
That's okay. I just wondered if Superintendent Gormley could follow up with that, because that was something that you had entertained, and perhaps you could articulate it on a little further.
Right. For the very reason that you picked up about the Tucker numbers, and obviously emails, and we knew this ourselves, going from 3 to 1 French immersion class, as opposed to at the Tucker and Cunningham, when the format is in place, and at the Glover and Collycott going from 4 to 2 classes, the percentages. And again, you just can't look at it and say 33 1/3% as opposed to 50%, because all your kindergartens at one school could be 18, and your kindergartens at another school could be all 22s. So there are a lot of variables and moving pieces. The plan was going to be to pair one of the plans, as I said, looking at several different plans, townwide lotteries and the whole spectrum, was to pair the Tucker and the Glover. So you would fill, well, first remembering that you assign students to the English. The English classrooms are going to drive the system, the 2 English classrooms in each school. And then you do ask the parents, you have a pool of individuals who want French immersion. So you would assign to each school, and with a cap of 26 to each school. And then if you had children at the Tucker and children at the Glover, if their parents and guardians, they didn't get into the French immersion, you could take that second Glover class, and I called it a shared class. And we brainstormed perhaps going back to the percentage of students from the Tucker who didn't get into the program, and take the number of students from the Glover who didn't get into the program, turn those into a percentage, and that's how you divide the seats in the Glover class. And we would do the same thing at the Collycott Cunningham. I brainstormed this with the mathematician, chairperson of the school committee, because as I was going through it, talk about going back to the original number of kindergartners, but then I said we'd probably go back to the number of students in each school that wanted French immersion. Again, some students, lottery cap, would not be assigned to the French immersion, and they would be in their respective English programs. So that would give more seats to the 2 schools that have 1 French immersion class. And again, last night I spoke to the audience, and I would say as divided as the community is on this issue, over the years, the community has been divided about homeschool. I know that people are passionate about their programs. In this town, people are passionate about their homeschools. If you would indulge me, in every district over the summer, at kindergarten and first grade, school systems work to equalize class size. We live and work in a community that people have, and it's amazing how many people come forward, have for class size to a person. You heard the number of people in the 3rd grade at Tucker. Those people are across the district. Mrs. Kelly and I have discussed this several times, even about transportation. To a person, to equalize class size, these parents and guardians and their children go to the school and they're happy. And they never call to ask, they want to go back to the school in which their neighborhood live in, their neighborhood children live in. So we really went with the homeschool plan. Again, for a lot of reasons, homeschool, bringing it all back to the homeschool. But over the years, we have had movement within this district, and evidenced by all of these individuals, parents and guardians who speak to it, they speak to it with ease, that they have gone for class size, some for class size. We do this in first grade, and some have gone for program. So that is another option, which would increase the number of seats for Tucker and Cunningham students, decreasing the number of seats reciprocally for the Glover and Collycutt.
Let me just follow that up with, I've heard a couple different statements from parents who interpreted the presentation differently. The issue of changing schools for program was brought up by a person in Citizen Speak. If there was 2 extra seats in French immersion at one school and there was 2 extra people who wanted French immersion at the other school, could they cross over? We would talk about having a waiting list, but I think parents are maybe not quite clear on that. Could you?
Well, my intention was, again, Mr. Phelan adding to the plan, that's why we said up to 26 students. We're thinking all of these are going to be maximum. So up to 26 students in French immersion, up to 22 students in the English program, the lowest number starting the English program being 18, other than the co-taught, which is really driven by the number of children with special needs in that class. When the children are assigned, and then if there were waiting lists in a respective school or schools, and there were seats in another school, and again, the first criteria, we have populated our English program, we would wait, we could look at the numbers. Again, people have worked with us, it might not be optimum, but they've worked all summer with us, and these would be people who wanted a program, and we would, I believe, in all of our work, working out these numbers with lots of different situations, have a town-wide lottery for those seats. So if we had 2 schools that students didn't get into French immersion, but yet both of those schools had numbers in their English program that were 18 and above, but we had one school that had 2 extra seats, we could look at that. And again, another, which the school committee understands and some of the public understands, we have new students moving in to the district. You had a question?
I just
Go ahead.
want to be clear, so the sister school, the thing that you're talking about is Tucker and Glover and Collycott and Cunningham. So if, right?
No, Cunningham, Collycott.
What did I say?
No, she said it right.
Oh, good, good, good.
Oh, I was going to say I said that wrong. So, in other words, there's an opening at Cunningham, but I'm Tucker, so I can't go, or I can?
Oh, no, you can.
I can, I
Yeah,
thought?
if all of the assignments were done. All right, so it's a great question, Ms. Bagley-Jones. The first round of lottery would be the paired sister-brother schools, the paired schools. And then the next round would be if there were any open seats,
In
which
any
could
of
be
the four
possible.
schools, okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I could see that happening.
Okay. Was somebody else? You know, from being on the World Language Committee with the leadership of Assistant Superintendent Phelan, was not always an easy task. It was not a lot of fun. We spent a lot of hours together. We all got to know each other very well. But it was a really good model for how we can talk about these issues, and I hope that that's what we're getting from this tonight, is how we can talk about these issues. Some in a respectful way of both programs, and I think we're getting there. But some of the things that really stood out for me, and John, help me if I'm wrong here, is that grandfathering in any level creates multiple issues, creates multiple perceptions of unfairness, whether it's real or not, I don't know. But grandfathering in general, I just wanted some of the things that stood out from the World Language Committee. It was just really painful for this community, and like, she got it and I didn't, and how come? Well, she knows Miss Gormley, and very untrue things, but the perception was grandfathering gave people favors, and so that's a concern, just as we're talking about this. The sister schools or the brother schools or the partner schools we talked about, but again, it was really something that was not something that this committee of, 25 people worked really hard on, thought was helpful. We didn't want to go with a cap because we thought that that was not in, we didn't want to go to a cap, but we all wanted to, most of us wanted to sustain the program, but we added the sibling preference. We kept the sibling preference and we added a tiered lottery, which had the sibling preference in it. And, Ms. Kelly and I, we don't always agree on everything, and we don't always agree on the language programs, but we're respectful of each other, we like each other, we all get along, we work hard on that. And one of the things we agree on that I think I heard you say tonight is that a cap sustains the French immersion program. I think that's what you said. No? Oh, I thought we agreed on that.
It helps to sustain it,
Okay.
sure.
Okay, I believe that a cap in the long run is going to help sustain the French immersion program. It pains me to see siblings in different programs. It pains me to see siblings in different schools. My kids were at the same school. My daughter, the youngest one, loved being at the same school with her brother. But the inn is full. I think the inn is full. And I don't know how to do this in the fairest way if siblings get a guarantee that they're in. It just doesn't feel fair.
I just want to make sure it's clear to the community when we talk about sibling preference, and I'm not sure whether or not, I'm just thinking that people don't fully understand the definition of that. So I just want to be clear so there's no confusion moving forward, that the original reason that we had a sibling preference portion of the auxiliary class tiered lottery system was because we decided that we wanted to keep children in the same school. And there was a chance that if you got picked to, if you were looking to be in the French program, you may have to leave your home school for the auxiliary class. And we said out loud that we would, if in fact you got picked, we would try to have you placed in the home school for that program. Because we wanted you in the home school with your sibling. It was about school, it wasn't necessarily about program. And I say that because when we looked at the data and we had conversation today, we had been looking at data of how many folks in kindergarten had siblings just in French. But it really should have been looked at as it was presented tonight by Superintendent Gormley. The real definition of sibling preference was by how many folks had siblings in that school, regardless of program, because we wanted to keep the family together in that school, K to 5. So that was the intent behind sibling preference at the time, was for school, not just for program. And I think that when we began talking about it more in the sense of the lottery, back when we did the tiered lottery, by the fact that we were only talking about the French choice, it became more in people's minds just about French siblings, when in fact it was a school sibling piece. So that was the intent, and that was what we did in practice with siblings. And I'm afraid that some people may have not understood that fully.
We would have had to call everyone back tomorrow night, because last night I said the number 19 at the Tucker for siblings. And my data was based on asking at the school level how many siblings in French immersion. But what we did today, and the data I gave you, is next year, again, what, to Mr. Phelan's point, we had always said in the building. So we had that data analyzed today to give you the number of French and English. And in my mind, when you talk about siblings, you would talk about English or French, if you have a sibling in the building, irregardless of which program. Do you agree?
I do, and with that said, the goal about having a local school and having a school-based lottery, that inherent in that was that every child would stay with their family, regardless if they were able to access the French program or not. So it wouldn't have to be a stipulation. It's part of a building-based lottery that we are almost 100% guaranteeing that we'll be able to keep folks in their home school, because we have X amount of students coming from kindergarten going into the same amount of classrooms in first grade in most circumstances, and that should leave room for everybody to be in either English or French if we have the ability to control for class size. So that was one of the main pillars of the building-based program that we presented last week.
Just to follow up that with the issue of partner schools, if you have these partnered schools, it does raise an interesting issue for exactly that building-based sibling. If my child is in Tucker and ends up in the split Tucker-Glover classroom, and then 2 years later, under sibling preference, my younger child at Tucker ends up in the Tucker classroom, does that child have preference to get into a joint classroom in the other school to keep them in the same building? It becomes, I mean, that was one of the logistical issues we ran across when you start moving people around between schools. And then, of course, the other issue is if you need the 15th classroom that year, you're not 2-1-2-1 anymore, then that becomes an auxiliary class model on top of the paired school model. And you can hire me to figure out how the lottery would work, because it would be tricky to get all those things right. I mean, some of the logistics involved with the pair schools were very tricky to work out. Anyone else? Sorry, Kristen.
And I don't mean to say that language classes in the middle and high school replace immersion, obviously, so please don't misunderstand me or misquote me and say, oh, she thinks that, French or Latin or Spanish in middle school and high school take the place of immersion. They don't. However, we do offer, I would like to know what we offer for languages in middle school. We used to offer French. I know we still offer Latin and Spanish. And in the high school, we offer French, Latin, and Spanish.
Yes.
Right? And there are issues, so, for example, my son was in Spanish in high school and did really, what do I want to say? Because YouTube and all that stuff. And he's 19, so he, definitely would see it. Anyway, kids can do really well in a language even if they're not in immersion. So kids can just do really well in a language. And so we have a really robust language program, but we also have 31 kids in Spanish classes at the high school. 31 kids in language in the high school when they're trying to get into college. It's not a good thing, and that's something we need to look at too. And it's been that way for a little while. So I really want to remind people that we have language programs after immersion, and it's not immersion, but there is a way to continue with languages, whether your child does immersion or does immersion for a couple years or whatever. There are other languages, and maybe we need to look at putting French back in the middle school. I know we don't have the money, but maybe that's something, right? We don't offer French in the middle school? We don't, or we do?
We do not.
We do not.
Currently, we offer French immersion at the middle school, Latin at the middle school, and Spanish at the middle school.
So if I'm a French immersion student, I can take French immersion at the middle school, but if I'm in English, I cannot take French in middle.
That's correct. You can take
Spanish or Latin.
Spanish or Latin.
Okay. Ms. Sheridan.
Sorry.
So as I'm sitting here thinking about all these scenarios that were playing out, I'm imagining how challenging this must be for people listening to it, and listening to it here and listening to it at home. And I think it speaks to the fact that we have really tried to be as transparent as physically possible with this whole process. Obviously, many things have been, scenarios have been played out with the superintendent and her leadership team. I want to thank all of the parents that have communicated with us, that have come and have spoken, as Mr. Pavlicek said earlier. I can't say strongly enough, your job as a parent is to advocate for your children. And so we appreciate that, and we expect that from you. But when I hear some people say, well, you haven't thought of everything, could there be something out there that hasn't been considered? Maybe, but I just know that the superintendent has done so much work with her leadership team. Not every single scenario has been presented to the public. We asked her to present a plan to us, and fully vetted to the best of her ability and that of her leadership team. So I just want to say that for those people who have spoken about the fact that, there are other maybe choices or ideas out there, I feel like there probably aren't, because our district better than anyone else. And the time that's been spent on this has been exorbitant. I also want to say that this is really a proactive process. This is not meant to be a process that is, shutting anyone out. We're trying to stay ahead of the game and make sure that we don't have challenges come the spring. So we may be having all this conversation, and it may not even be necessary. And no one hopes that more than all of us probably sitting here at this table. But it's still a very good conversation to have, as has been already said around this table tonight. But again, we're being proactive. We're trying to look at all the possibilities. We're trying to see what all the options are and come up with a plan so that if we should be faced with these same challenges again in the spring, that we'll have something ready to go and we're not being reactive. Instead, we're being proactive. So I just felt like I needed to say that because so many different things are being shared around the table, and that people in the viewing audience maybe haven't heard about before, but certainly the leadership team has discussed. So,
Ms. Padera.
Yeah, I would just like to reiterate, I do agree. I think that unfortunately, being proactive means thinking of the worst case scenario. So thinking of that, can be very disheartening, and I certainly don't want to dismiss anybody's feelings of being disappointment isn't a big enough word, but in all programs, if things don't go the way that we want them to. But we've, this proposal alone, there are other things as you go through the process that we can work on to hopefully change the numbers organically, which would be more healthy anyways. The STEM program was added. The enrollment procedures can be much different and much more educational. I know the administration has done a very, very good job, but there are things that we can do to highlight some of the things in both programs, and bringing out parents that speak so well of each program to really talk about it so people can make really great choices and hopefully not have disappointment anywhere, because we can say, well, there's disappointment everywhere, but it's very heartfelt when it's your young children and you are planning for them and you've been excited about it and you've looked up to it, and it's hard to take. So.
Ms. Kelly.
Just, we for many, many years, from my perception, are known as the language capital of Massachusetts. And with what we're discussing, which will help all programs thrive, it's my hope, and I probably won't participate in it because I would rather us be the science capital of the world, but that's a whole other story. My hope that maybe some creative people out there will get together and we can use after school, we can use Saturday programs, we can use summer programs to create language immersion programs that, yes, you would need to pay a fee to come and participate in, but that if that's really important to so many families in this community, let's get together and let's do something like that. Maybe it's not French, maybe it's Chinese. I don't know, but I think our community is amazing. And, you know, maybe a door's closing here for some kids, but maybe it will open another door for other opportunities.
Ms. Bagley-Jones.
Can I just ask a question about STEM?
Yes.
Okay. I know that we just piloted this year, so we haven't had a lot of time to talk about it. It's something we have talked about at some of our meetings over the years, like what else can we do, not because the English program is lacking in any way, but because kids don't all learn through a language-based program, and we want everybody to have access to a unique program. English program is wonderful, the French immersion program is wonderful, I just want to be clear about that. But the STEM program is exciting because not all kids learn through a language, and some kids need those hands-on, how do you say, kinesthetic, you know what I mean? Yes, thank you. And I'm wondering, since it is a new program to us and we're just piloting it, could we have a parent night where we actually demonstrate, Holly and
Marilyn.
Demonstrate it? I don't know if you do a kids' night, that might be too premature, but you know, we always do open house for parents and kids at Pierce and open house for parents and kids at the high school. I don't know, I'd like to see, I'd like to go to a STEM night and see what it's like. So is that something we could do?
Yep. Absolutely. And we heard, yes, and, well, we heard the public last night, and we have Marilyn Decker, a parent in the audience, commented that the individual first grade teachers, a parent said to me, I've got all the information about STEM on my refrigerator, on the refrigerator notes. And so I asked Marilyn Decker and the first grade teachers to share those and to start in my email blasts and in the local paper to give an update. But you are right, to see it is better than even reading about it. So we will set up those times.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Padera.
And Superintendent Gormley, I'm not sure if I'm correct on this, but was there going to be some kind of table or information about, it was either robotics or STEM at the Monster Dash, which is a race in favor of science program?
That's a great point. That would have been missed. With the Monster Dash, sponsored by the MFE, began when a child at the Tucker died, Sam Cocello, and his family, and his interest was science. And so the Monster Dash, in coordination with his family, and now the community has taken it on in the MFE, all the funds raised go to science in the elementary schools. So the science directors, Barbara Polonsky and now Marilyn Decker, attend the event, and Marilyn Decker is going to work with the first grade teachers and have a STEM display, and I believe they're going to bring the middle and high school robotics students so that the community can see those in action.
Anything else people want to comment on?
Do we have a motion on the floor?
No.
Who wants to make it?
Want me to try to summarize it? And correct me if I'm wrong, I am hearing consensus along on the superintendent's plan, to put it very briefly. Please correct me if I'm only dreaming this, but it appears that people are saying that we need to cap the program. The cap lottery is what we're looking at. I hear from around the table no sibling preference. That's what I'm hearing. Correct me if I'm wrong.
And one dissenting vote on that.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, you know.
Well, as I said, I
don't want to speak for
I'm
you.
not prepared to advocate for sibling preference indefinitely. I do believe that
we changed the rules very late in the game on this, and parents just found out details, and that this approach specifically included the elimination of sibling preference a couple of weeks ago. That's, in my view, that's not enough time. So I would say that for the 2013, and I'm not advocating that we treat sibling preference any differently than we have, only that we apply it for this additional year because, frankly, we got to parents too late with the notion that it wasn't going to be available anymore. So if I made the motion, then mine would include that modification. But I'm in support of the superintendent's plan.
Well, can I ask a question on your view on the sibling preference? If in your model of just extending it for 1 year to this year's kindergartners.
Right. So I call it the current model.
Right. Well, the current model, again, was based on schools.
Let's make sure the superintendent's listening.
Yeah, the current model was based on schools. So for instance, would your model say that if someone has an older sibling in second grade English, they have preference for French immersion?
Yes.
Well, I mean, the current model says that because you're staying in the same building. We're extending, if you're talking about extending sibling preference to programmatic, even for 1 year to a program.
How does it work now?
The way it works now is everyone gets whatever they want in terms of programming. That's not the issue. It's you may not be in the same school. The sibling preference is to make sure that siblings stay in the same physical building. Now, if we are talking about a sibling preference, even for this year's kindergartners, we're talking about it being applied to program, right? And that's a change. And so the question is, I'm just asking the question is, how do you intend to apply it to program? Is it, the fact you have a second grader in the school puts you automatically in French regardless of whether the second grader's in English or French? That wouldn't seem to make a lot of, if the purpose is to keep people in the same program, that wouldn't seem to make sense.
So it would seem to me, and the compelling part of what I heard last night was, if you had a sibling in French already, and you had someone in kindergarten who was interested, then that would apply.
Mr. Phil.
I think that those are two different things. I think that originally we said that we're allowing potentially for siblings this year because we are altering the expectation or the policy at this late hour. I think that that's what you said initially.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, it should be open to anybody who had a sibling, regardless of program, because that's not based on program. I could have chose English for my second grader and had always hoped that maybe my next guy coming up could be someone who I might want to have in the French program. So if we're doing it because the late hour of the change, I believe it should be open to all. If you're doing it to keep families together who just chose French, I think that those are two separate things.
I would accept that friendly amendment.
I'm not making an amendment. I don't do that for a living. I'm saying, I just want to be clear, as the person who would like to implement, who has to implement, I really want to be clear to the public that those are two separate things, and we should just make sure that we're aware.
And I've got an amendment, and I don't make amendments either, that in the spirit of brainstorming this, it would have to be that in the respective school, first, the English classes are filled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's part of the plan.
So,
go ahead.
So can you restate what you're saying in the motion?
Let John restate it, because he just amended it. But my point is that it's too late for this particular class to change the rules. That's my point.
Can I just comment? Again, over the years, one of the reasons there is the divisiveness that there is in our track system is because changes have happened like that to the English. And this is in no part meant to disparage all the parents that are really feeling angst about this. But we have truly taken away recess. We have cut the number of sessions in FLES. We have just done all those kinds of things in French, and that impacts families as well. And it was budgetary then. We didn't have a choice. The one thing about having these two programs as they exist is that from a budgetary perspective, there is very little to be able to do to save money that affects the French program. But there's 2 teachers that teach FLES in the English track. There was recess at one point, and that was more, I think, on professional development issues that came up from a contractual perspective. But there have been changes implemented on English families over the years, and unfortunately, that's part of why there's divisiveness now. I'm not saying that we should do this because then it's even, because it's never going to be even. Again, I advocate for no tracks, let's get everybody proficient by grade 2. But we are where we are, and I think that we have to draw a line in the sand. And yes, it's unfortunate that some children will not be able to get their program of choice, that being French. But we are the Milton Public Schools. We have great programs regardless of what they are. And again, it's my hope that if people are really passionate about foreign language and the ability to have classes in immersion, then let's be creative and create those settings outside of our public school that exists right now.
Ms. Padera?
I would just say it's also late in the game for the other side, though. That's my problem, is I have no problem. It'd be really nice to give, one side, and that's not a side, but a sibling preference, to give that to them. Unfortunately, what it does, if all siblings do take that choice, it blocks, it is a change in the game because they have no chance at all. Instead of having a very good chance, they might have no chance at all. So that's my only, I totally feel for those families. I agree it's late in the game, but isn't it late in the game for everyone? So I would just say, how do you answer that question for people that don't have a sibling?
Well, let me also say, too, when we're talking about changing the game, again, the sibling preference as it exists right now is to keep kids in the same school. What we've changed is the fact, assuming this goes through as the superintendent states, is that we've changed the notion that you get to elect your program, period, with no constraints on how many people elect which program. And that actually affects everybody, not just those with siblings. That's a change for everyone here. Our assignment program, where we're talking about the lottery and so forth, would still protect siblings being in the same building. That isn't changing because the sibling preference for the same building is still part of the superintendent's assignment plan. But the notion that 2 siblings wouldn't both be in French is not a function of doing away with the sibling preference. It's a function of doing away with the notion that regardless of how many people take French, you're going to get in it. And that affects everybody. That's changing the game for everybody, not just those with older siblings. So that's my trouble with the 1 year. It's I don't think we're addressing the cause of the problem.
Well, we differ on that, but does anybody have a motion?
No.
Oh, well, do you have a question?
I have a question or a comment. I guess, as everybody's saying, we're heartbroken over the idea of not having siblings in the same program. But I guess I really do feel like in a year we'll be back exactly where they are. And you and I both have 2 years left on the school committee, so we will be here. Just to point that out to you. Others of us may not be, but we will be here, Mr. Walker. So will Ms. Ms. Gormley and the educational leadership team will still be here as well. And I just don't know if it's responsible to say, well, for a year we'll let this go, but next year we're coming back and telling you your 3rd child can't go. I just think that we're just and what's the alternative? What are we going to do this year? Ms. Gormley has really gone, and the leadership team has gone through all the options, as Ms. Sheridan said. What will we do? Let's say we vote to say what you're suggesting. What will we do next September 1st? What's the plan? Do we scramble to try to find out a new plan?
No.
Physically, plant-wise, numbers of kids, spaces for classrooms, what do we do?
It's already laid out. It's 14 classes.
It can go up to 15 classes, but, so it would just be...
This doesn't change that.
Oh, so it wouldn't change the classrooms, but it would change where my kid might, I don't know. It's late, I'm tired, but...
I think the thing to do in this particular case is we need to come to some agreement on this issue of do we have a sibling preference for
Well-
1 year or not? And I think,
And it's, I don't think I have the support for my proposed modification, so if someone would like to make a motion that we accept the superintendent's plan, then we could vote.
is that,
So moved.
Seconded.
Can I just
Kelly.
add a little bit more language to it?
Sure.
So the principles put forward in the superintendent's proposal, including no sibling preference. I still have the question mark about twins and triplets, so I don't know whether that would be detailed out in the policy. And I don't know whether we would need to weigh in on that as part of this discussion, just so that we have a sense of where we're at with that.
But what's the answer to that question? How are twins treated?
Well, that's what I told you, and as I said, we spent a tremendous amount of time, and I have to tell you, we were more than 50%, as I was, that twins would be treated as one, and triplets. There are no triplets this year.
So if one twin gets accepted in the French, they're
Yes.
both accepted in the French and vice
Yes.
versa?
And again, we have talked to our attorneys, and I have the law here, parents of twins can ask for them to be in the same room, and we're not doing this for any legal obligation, because our attorney said they can be in the same room, they can be in English. But over the years, we have, again, this is how we've dealt with twins. John?
I just wanted to make sure it was clear that, so when twins get put into the lottery, they would get one ticket, not two tickets.
Seats.
So it'd be
One-
Sally and Johnny on one ticket.
And two seats.
And yeah, we'd give them 2 seats. I think we can afford 2 seats. 2 chairs.
Otherwise, we'd be crowded.
So if that was the 10th ticket taken out of the hat, as we have in the past, that would occupy 10 and seat 10 and seat 11, and then we'd pick the next one out of the hat. So just to be clear, that it wasn't they're not 2 tickets, they don't get twice the chance to get together. They get 1 chance with both names on it, but they would get 2 seats with that chance. That's how we have done it in the past.
And-
Mr. Walker.
And if, for some reason, a parent wanted to separate them, could they
Fine.
do that as well?
Absolutely.
They would just put in the one name for their one child, and they would assign their other child to the other program.
yeah, the issue under the law is that they can request to be in the same classroom for twins. It's not at all clear in a situation like French immersion, where it's an option to go into French immersion, whether that would still hold as a matter of law, because it's not the sort of thing I don't think anyone envisioned when they wrote the statute.
Well, our attorney said they have a choice.
Yeah, the most strict interpretation of the law is, well, if they could be in the same classroom if they were in English, then you wouldn't violate the law, but yeah, I agree, it probably makes more sense to just apply it either way and just say, if we're going to let them choose to be in the same classroom, whichever program they're in. Ms. Bagley Jones?
I have twins, get number 26. So now we have a class of 27, and we're going to have parents asking us for an aide. So let's just be really clear. If twins get picked as number 26 in the lottery, and we have 27 kids in the class, we do not have the money for an aide to go
Right.
into that classroom.
Right.
Say that loud and
Yeah.
clear, and it's in the minutes.
So what we, under the current circumstances in Tucker, as an example, where there are 64 students in K, 27 of whom have siblings, if they all did in fact choose to go into the French program, ironically, there would have to be a sibling lottery to determine which one of those students would not be in the program. And I say that because we put that circumstance in the tiered lottery.
Yep.
That was a line of the tiered lottery that we considered and had in place at that time. So if in fact every single child who has a sibling chooses to be in French, there would have to be a lottery. If not, then the seats would be available, and then the quote, traditional lottery would take place for the open seats, minus the folks who chose English.
And how many sets of twins?
So
Be 26 in French.
So right now, just to be clear, and this is only one school, so I don't want to belabor it, because Mary, do you understand, Mary Kelly?
I don't, I'm sorry, I'm a
Okay, so you
little
look at,
lost.
there's 64 students in kindergarten at the Tucker, 27 of whom have siblings. So if they're all grandfathered in, there's going to be one child that may not be able to get there. So we have to say that the sibling rule will only be in place, there's going to have to be a lottery to allow for that class size to remain at 26.
I don't think we're talking about grandfathering.
Yeah, we're not talking
Right.
about grandfathering, right? I thought there was
Talking twins.
no.
Oh, I'm
sibling-
sorry, I apologize.
You were studying it. It's
I was studying it, Mary.
Okay, good, that's, I'm glad I had that question.
But can I just say
Yes,
about the
go.
twins?
It's good information.
Well, we have 3 sets of twins at Collycott, and I'm not picking on twins. I have very good friends who have twins. We have 2 sets of twins at Cunningham and 1 set of twin at Tucker. So just want to be clear, if they pulled number ticket 26, those classes are 27. Right?
At Collycott, there would be another class. I mean, there are 2 classes.
So there's a
But it-
chance of that to happen.
Oh,
Okay.
But essentially, what she's saying is right.
If they were the last,
If
if they were the last ticket,
choice,
what would we do?
yes,
Yeah.
putting that out there.
It could happen.
Understood.
Moving on from that.
All right, so. Yes.
I think that we need to be clear about what we're voting on
Yes.
here one
Yes.
more
Thank you.
time. Thank you.
So the motion is to vote principles put forward in the superintendent's proposal, including no sibling preferences and no grandfathering. The stipulation about the twins or triplets that was just described, so that's an addition to the proposal that's been put forward thus far. Is there additional components of this?
I was
that-
just, should we articulate
Yes.
exactly what those
Yes.
principles included are? So
Yes.
a cap and a lottery and
Well,
if needed.
Can we have a highlight of what it is? Because I'm just
Yeah,
uncomfortable
I
with
mean,
not
that's a-
specific language.
Back to, each school will have a minimum of 2 sections of English to promote optimal learning environments for all students. If more than 14 sections of grade 1 are necessary, the superintendent will create any additional sections based on the needs of the district. The superintendent will determine class size for English up to 22 and French immersion up to 26 each year based on enrollment. I don't know if you want to go through the lottery.
I think that's the,
All students will select French, will enter the lottery, and siblings will not receive preference for placement in French immersion. Students will be placed to the open seats in their school based on their assignment order determined by the school-based lottery until the seats are filled. Students who are not placed in the French immersion program will be placed in the English program at their home school. And we wrote, if class size allows, obviously, anyone who hears the discussion and has worked with us knows we're going to prioritize home school. This was, as we worked out every single version, just to understand about the caps and class size. And students who are not placed in the French immersion program will also be placed on a wait list. In the event that seats open up in French immersion, or are open in French immersion, at their school. Or town, I should add, at their school or townwide,
Right.
how long is the wait list?
till the first day of school.
Okay.
Which, Ms. Bagley Jones, having worked on this, is a change because it used to be into the first month of school, the first day of school.
Does Maura have that in the minutes? Maura?
It's the exact, it's the plan.
I mean, just want to make sure we have the right language.
All right, so the function of the wait list, too, we should talk about, if someone is placed in English and they're on a wait list for French, in the summer, people who move in
No, come on, they'll
are
go
being
into.
placed in English.
Right.
And so, assuming there are seats, assuming they were put in English because there are, and there are still seats in French, people put in English could conceivably free up someone from the English class to go into a French class if there was a seat available.
And if we go through all of the students who want French immersion and new students move into the district,
They don't get in.
and the English classes are all at 18 and there are seats in French immersion, those children can go into French immersion if we haven't come up to the 26. And we have placed everybody in the district, but most importantly, we have the enrollment in the English classes. In its first year of implementation, the Cunningham School will have 4 sections of grade 1 to account for the 4 sections of kindergarten this year. In 2013-14 school year, the superintendent will determine if the 4th section of grade 1 is English or French immersion based on the needs of the district, and really that should be parental request. Additional notes, Milton Public School kindergarten students on the French immersion wait list will be kept on school-based wait lists. We'll say / town-wide wait lists. If a seat in French immersion opens up, the next student on the school-based wait list / town-wide wait list will be offered the seat. And non-Milton Public School kindergarten students who are registering to enter the French immersion program in grade 1 will enter a separate lottery and be in a wait list for seats in the district until the start of the school year. Non-Milton Public School kindergarten students will receive a seat in French immersion if there is an open seat and all current Milton Public School students have been accommodated in the program of their choice. I think that clearly articulates that. At the start of school, all wait lists for French immersion will be abolished.
Did you have a question? or-
No, just the non-Milton Public School, so there's no legal issues around having 2 separate lotteries? If we establish a deadline by which parents make choices?
Yeah. Not to my understanding, no.
So we asked that, I'm sorry.
No, I'll check that.
Yeah, I think that needs to be checked before this is put into policy. So the motion includes everything that's been said, but also with the intention that this gets turned into policy language and then would be presented to the school committee.
Right, the wait list piece is a little complicated because there are several different reasons you could be on a wait list. Take the Tucker example that we have here where there would be 62 seats in Tucker, and if there were fewer than 62 kindergartners, you could conceivably have seats open in French immersion, but someone in English on a wait list to get into French immersion. But then when someone moved into the district and was placed in Tucker, that child could move out of the English class and into the vacant seat in French. So there's a school-based wait list and the town wait list for this,
And if I
it
might-
is fairly complicated.
And remember Dr. Martine Fisher's research, every school has a cap, and they use a lottery. And so there were questions on the website as to how the lottery will work, and who will run the lottery, and how public the lottery will be. We'll research all of the districts and find out how they do it, and come back to the school committee with the process.
Back to the policy subcommittee with the process.
Could we just clarify that all those lotteries are held publicly?
Yes. Well, it was interesting. Some of them, I thought of Mr. Walker when you did the random computer run on how the candidates would be interviewed. And one district that we spoke to, that's how they determined the lottery numbers.
Anything else that needs clarification on this motion?
Just one point on the policy committee work. So that this is going to be a little different in that we're actually voting approval now.
Right.
So when we come back with the policy, it's not to approve this all over again. It's simply to say, well, the words have captured what we approve.
Correct. Ms. Bagley-Jones.
And just as a follow-up, we have a meeting scheduled, the policy subcommittee has a meeting scheduled on November 1st, so maybe we could bring this to the November 7th meeting.
Ms. Bagley-Jones.
Do we all often, when you guys bring back, you work very hard on the policies and bring them back, and we often have comments and changes. Are we going to do that? We have to do that with this, but does that mean it goes against what you just said?
No, that was precisely my point. I'm
I
not
know.
looking for edits, commas, no, bring it back again, no, bring it back again.
So does that have to be a vote?
I don't really think it does, frankly, but we'll be happy to produce a document.
I think,
I'm drawing a clear distinction between what we normally do
Right.
and
Yeah.
what we're doing here.
right.
And I'm saying, does that have to be a
Yeah, I
motion?
think that policy, I would expect the policy subcommittee would bring it back to us to say, this document
Is now-
reflects what we said, correct? You know, and to that extent, I think we would volunteer edits should we think it did accurately reflect what we said. But we trust you won't do
Well-
that.
I don't want to take much time on this.
Yeah.
I'm already,
Yeah, Ms. Keller?
Just, this is a very unique process.
Yes,
But it's
absolutely.
given direction, I mean, we're agreeing on principles, that needs to be transferred into policy. The hope is that the policy will capture everything we've talked about and we'll be fine. But I think it would be unusual for us not to also vote on the policy language.
here's what I'm going to suggest. This is not rocket science. So we have the PowerPoint presentation, we have Maura's minutes. We're going to try to combine those two. And we're going to show it to you. But I don't think we need to vote it. I don't think it's another approval. It's simply, okay, you've put it into an 8.5 by 11 form instead of a PowerPoint and minutes.
Right, and I understand what you're saying, but we're voting policies that have not been changed, just so that we can put at the bottom of it that we voted it as a school
No,
committee
actually,
on a date.
if they haven't been changed, we don't vote them at all.
I could swear that you brought a couple of them.
Reauthorize.
You're reauthorizing them. My point is, policies are meant, they're supposed to be in a certain format, and that they are voted by school committees. That's what we do. That's how we guide. So to say that we won't vote on it, I don't think is correct.
Well, I think
But I guess if the point is that we're not going to change our minds in terms of the principles of what has just been discussed.
That's
and
precisely
will
the
be voted
point.
on. Right. It will only be around whether we've captured in the language of the policy all the principles that we've just described, and that we believe it will guide the system moving forward.
If for some reason someone wanted to change the policy that we voted on as it came back for something more than wording it, to my mind, that would be a reconsideration of a prior motion. It would
On that
have a
point,
higher threshold to be accomplished. So I'm
Correct.
not terribly worried about having to come back and re-vote it again and redo the debate. Yes, Ms. Bagley-Jones.
Can you just say that again and say it louder? And I want to be really clear what that means for the viewing public and for
If we're
myself.
voting policy and concept right now, and we send it to the policy committee to be written up in formal language and standard form, they bring it back to us, we're just okaying that they have captured the wording of the policy. If anyone were to try to take that opportunity to say, no, I want to change my mind, I think we should change our mind, that's a reconsideration of a prior vote, and that has a higher threshold under Roberts to be reconsidered and brought back. So I think, I'm not worried about us doing that too much. It would have to be a major change of mind between now and then to do it. I'm not worried that we will get bogged down in this again, because we'd have to move reconsideration, reopen debate, a variety of different things. And given that it will be a couple meetings out, it would need a 2/3 vote to reconsider and so forth. So I'm not worried about it.
And then I'll be quiet, just ask this one last thing. So, in other words, intense lobbying to get us to change it when we approve the policy language under Robert's rules needs a 2/3 vote. Okay, because we're going to get that. We do understand that, right?
We can, like anything else, any policy we have, we are, a body and we can change it. I mean, we can do it.
Okay.
nothing is ever etched in stone. We can't bind the hands of future school committees. These things are what they are, but
Okay.
you can't say anything is absolute forever. It's just beyond the scope of our ability to do anything like that. We can say what we want to do, but we can't say what will never happen in the future.
We'll invite Ms. Kelly to the policy committee meeting.
As long as it's an evening meeting, I'll be there.
Anything else? We have a motion on the table. It was made by Ms. Kelly. Do we have a?
It was seconded.
Was seconded by Ms. Bagley Jones? Okay. Remember. Anything else? All those in favor? It is unanimous. Thank you. All right. More orders of business. Yes.
Can I ask Ms. Gormley to make the announcement about the Chris Herron? Is that out of order, because that's tomorrow night? Right?
Yes. Tomorrow night, Chris Herron, former member of the Boston Celtics and a local high school basketball star, will be the guest of 2 Milton High School events. Tomorrow night, for all parents and guardians, town hall style meeting in the Milton High School auditorium at 7 o'clock, and then every Milton High School student on Monday morning in the Copeland Fieldhouse.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item on our agenda are the MASC resolutions. We have the MSC annual meeting coming up in 3 weeks. And there are several resolutions, 5, is it 5 or 6? 5 resolutions on their docket. And we have to decide if we wish to authorize our representative to vote one way or another on them, or her judgment. So we're going to have to run through the 5 of them. The first one on the establishment of a special commission of the legislature for the study of mandated reports and data submissions for school districts. Basically, the Framingham School Committee put this one forward, feeling that the number of mandated reports to school districts is intense. They're recommending the state try to establish an Office of Paperwork to reduce the Office of Paperwork and Regulatory Reduction to reduce the amount of paperwork necessary by the schools by combining reports and so forth, and trying to, I think it's, personally think it's hysterical that we're going to establish a commission to reduce paperwork, which will, but we won't go there. Probably cause more paperwork than it reduces, but. So, anyone have an opinion on that, or?
It's basically just the creation of a commission that would study it
Right.
and make recommendations, right?
Right.
So I'm in favor. So I'd move that we, as a committee, endorse our representative, thank you, Mr. Derrick, to vote in favor of Resolution 1.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Did we get the recommendation of the superintendent on that?
No,
No?
because this is on an MASC
Oh,
resolution.
right, I'm sorry.
So it's 5-0, Mr. Walker out of the room. Ms. Bagley Jones. Second one is a modification of the circuit breaker formula, which basically would increase the amount that comes back from the state from 75% of the cost after 4 times to 100% after the cost of 4 times the foundation formula. So it's more money for circuit breaker.
I make a motion that we vote to say yes, or vote yes for this resolution 2.
Second.
Second by Ms. Kelly. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Third one, health insurance coverage for medically necessary treatment in schools. This one is to support a particular piece of legislation which would require government and health and private health insurance to cover medically necessary expenses for children with educational deficits or learning disabilities who are in the schools.
I make a motion to vote yes on Resolution 3.
Second by Ms. Madera. Ms. Kelly?
Can I just ask, presently it's not required, or some pay and some don't pay? What
This
is
is probably a question
the
for Mr.
present
Gillis.
state of
Mr.
this
Gillis has a
issue?
circuit breaker down.
Well, this isn't,
No, this isn't
Oh,
circuit
number
breaker.
Sorry, I'm ready for the circuit breaker one.
the
Health insurance.
Health insurance doesn't, to my knowledge, have to cover expenses, health expenses that are treated in the schools.
Yeah, for the most part, that's correct. So if, you don't have any copay when the nurse provides some type of service for the student in schools, but schools are not obligated to provide physician services on a regular basis, just the general annual things or guidance. But if a student needed a physician's assistance to be at school every day, the health insurance wouldn't necessarily, the school's insurance wouldn't necessarily cover something like that.
The school's insurance?
Well, the school wouldn't be obligated to provide the insurance or provide the service. But there's some things that we do by law, and there are other things that we don't have to do because we're a school, we're not a medical treatment facility.
And there's a, right, but.
Right, so is this saying that the schools would would be providing services that we presently don't provide, and that we're asking the government to basically say that these expenses would be covered by individual insurance?
No, these are services we currently do provide, but for which we're not necessarily entitled to insurance reimbursement, depending on the particular insurance that the student's family may have. Some insurers may cover it, others may not, and this is to require that if, they need treatment in the school for one of the things that we treat for that's billable, they should pay for it.
I was just going to say, I think if we read the rationale out loud, it's a little bit helpful because basically it says an increasing number of special ed students come to school needing accommodations for physical health-related issues rather than educational deficits or learning disabilities. These medically fragile students require special aid, sometimes the care of one-to-one nurses, specialized transportation, administration of oxygen or medically necessary care accommodations that they also require at home. Yet school districts are required by law to provide these accommodations regardless of whether the need stems from medical or educational needs. And meeting the educational needs of every child is the obligation of all school districts. Meeting the health care needs of every child is the obligation of the Commonwealth's public and private health care systems. And this proposed legislation will require healthcare systems to cover medically necessary expenses without exception.
Okay?
Question?
Yes.
Maybe, Ms. Padera, you could ask about this. It says cover physical and mental health care expenses, and mental health expenses are on parity with physical expenses now, physical ailments now, but it doesn't say anything in here about mental health in the rationale. So it's really medical, because there is the other bill coming up that's going to say schools are going to have to provide this, which I support, around mental health. And then the other thing, it says with one exception, but it doesn't say what the exception is. The first paragraph says cover physical and mental health care expenses for all children with one exception. What's the one exception?
Well, I think it's the age requirement, right? Is that what they're saying?
Oh, the one exception is on the next page.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, and it says mental health care expenses, but in the rationale, it doesn't say anything.
So you want me to ask them whether mental health care
Where does
expenses
mental
are
health
included?
piece go
Are
in?
those included in that as a medical expense? Is that correct?
Thank you.
Yep, Matt.
We do provide some mental health, I think, in a generic term, services for folks, the psychological services and testing that we have put out for kids to get an evaluation of baseline so we can, set the individual education programs or the 504s to accommodate students that might fall under their category of mental health. Sometimes it's also some emotional counseling to help students get through the day with a school adjustment counselor or a psychologist.
Ms. Sheridan?
I believe that the IEP testing that needs to be done by the psychologist would not be covered under this. That's my belief, that that's the responsibility of the school district.
But I'm wondering if other,
Go ahead.
if other expenses that would be typically covered under a person's health care, would be, that we may do in the school and would be covered. So is that what you're asking as well?
Yeah.
So, for an example with the mental health for a psychologist, if a parent didn't want to use the school psychologist to provide the tests, they could get their own independent psychologist, but they would be paying for it with their insurance. And is my understanding of this is this would allow us to get some coverage here and possibly some for the parents as well, as it's necessary for the student to perform well in school.
All right. Anything on Resolution 3 then? Is there a motion?
Move approval.
So,
Yep, it has.
Yep, so Mr. Walker moved to approve.
I missed that.
You already did it.
Move approval of Resolution 3, and Ms. Sharon seconded? Or,
We already
I
did
think
that.
I moved it.
And I second it.
okay.
All right.
Anything else on Resolution 3? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Resolution 4 is on funding for the new evaluation system. They're bringing, be it resolved, they bring to the attention of the auditor that this new statewide educator evaluation system is an unfunded mandate, and that they be requested to identify for the court the cost of the unfunded mandates related to education evaluation, so the legislature could fund it.
Move approval.
Yep.
Second.
Comments? All those in favor?
I do want to
Yep.
make a comment. I think this one is particularly important for those districts that did not get raised to the top funding, so
Right.
it's.
All right,
Of
so.
which we are one.
Of which we are.
Just make sure everybody knows that.
All right, so all those in favor of Resolution number 4? That's unanimous. And finally, Resolution 5, the adequacy study. And it's basically calling on the general court to determine, once again, the appropriate funding level for public schools and to make adjustments to the foundation budget and Chapter 70 as required. Basically, once again, asking them to look at Chapter 70.
So move.
Says little chance of passage by the legislature.
Yes, I agree.
Doesn't hurt to ask.
Nope, not at all.
Yep, Matt.
The last time there was a study, it did actually benefit Milton. They brought everybody up, they raised the floor. So instead of the state's minimum being 12.5% of the net school spending requirement, it bumped up to 17.5%. So Milton, went with the new bottom. And we did pretty well in Chapter 70 for a few years. And now that's kind of exhausted. So the timing of a new study, especially if it continued to raise the floor, would benefit Milton. So, the odds are in our favor, I guess, that continues to move along.
Anything else on Resolution 5?
Did anyone second that? Second.
Did you hear a second?
Second.
Kristen? All right, all those in favor of Resolution 5? And that's unanimous. That ends my report. Superintendent Gormley, your report.
I'm going to ask Mr. Phelan to report out the diversity report and the annual field trips.
In your packet, you will find the Milton Public Schools and School Committee Diversity Policy labeled IFC. In that policy, there is an expectation that a diversity report will be submitted to the Milton Public School Committee in October of each year. The report that we write incorporates the activities and diversity efforts from the previous school year, and we'd like to highlight 5 different areas: hiring of staff, we provide enrollment data, student achievement data, diversity in our schools, in the activities, in the partnerships that we have, and how we embrace diversity in our community. So the document and the report provided, as you can see, outlines the hiring efforts with percentages of our demographics of our teaching staff. On the second page, the enrollment data that we have in regards to our white and non-white students, which has remained at 70%, 30% for the last 4 school years. There is a section that we provide a brief update of our student achievement. More of that student achievement data will be provided by each school as they come to present in front of the school committee during the school year with their site councils. And most importantly, it talks about the diversity efforts that are taking place each year in each of our 6 schools. It should be noted that the Milton Public Schools has diversity committees in each school that are very active, with parent and teacher and administrative participation and a community member participation. It should be noted that the Milton Public School Administration, Superintendent Gormley and myself, meet monthly with the Citizens for Diverse Milton, which is an overarching group that supports all of our school-based diversity committees. That group work that we do at Citizens for Diverse Milton and our partnership with them results in 2 district-wide diversity events every year. We'll be hosting one in this library in November of this school year and probably in March. And what those workshops look like is it is a chance for all 6 diversity committees to come together, create common themes and common initiatives, and support each of the school's work in the area of enhancing the school experience, the curriculum, the teaching and learning, and the parental engagement through the lens of diversity. We value the relationship we have with the Citizens for Diverse Milton, and we believe that incorporating our partnership goals with them at the school level supports student learning and student achievement for all students. Lastly, we have a brief update by school of the MCAS data. These sheets that you are viewing are ones that we presented briefly when we talked about the new PPI accountability process, and this data will be presented by myself in full at our next school committee meeting. That would have been tonight, but it was postponed to our first November meeting. So this report is submitted for your approval for the 2012-2013 school year diversity report.
I would entertain a motion to accept the diversity report.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Bagley Jones. All those, yes?
Question?
Yes.
So the percentage of staff, 11%, Mary and John, that is an improvement each year? Correct? A higher percentage, rather?
The percentages are just about at the state average, but we were just a little bit above the state average last year. So I believe we were at 12% last year, and we went down by 1% this year.
Anything else, Ms. Kelly?
Just seeing the trending on some of these data points, I think is important just to give, to your point, I mean, you had a perception that it was going up.
Right.
Where if we had the data right in front of us, we would know sort of where we're at.
So would you like in the green folders for me to provide you a 5-year outlook of the staffing and enrollment data by race?
Yeah, I wouldn't be asking to do that now. I mean, I would love to be able to review what this report is. Because one of the things that, you know, I appreciate the data that's provided at the end, but we have an achievement gap. I think one of our strategic goals hopefully will be, you know, what efforts are we putting in place to address that? This would be a great opportunity to sort of present the at least the MCAS results, and maybe there's other results that we could be presenting that would basically give the community information as to how we're succeeding on that effort. So at some point, I think it would be great to sort of go into a little bit more detail as what's provided here and see if we can add a little bit more detail in terms of that.
Just as an example of how we partner with the Citizens for Diverse Milton. The November district-wide event will take the student achievement data that we have by school, match it up against the school improvement plans that each school has, and set it next to their diversity committee goals to make sure that the lens of diversity is looked at as we view all the data. So that's going to be an activity for 2 hours that each school will go through with the diversity committees, which is consistent, or consists of teachers and administrators. So that will be done in a small level, just at that meeting. All at this table are welcome to attend. It's about 35 folks. We provide dinner. It is a enjoyable but productive environment that we discuss education, teaching and learning, and student achievement of our Milton Public School students through the lens of diversity. So that work, in a very small way, not in the district way, but is very much done at a school level and at a district level on that day. So we look forward to that. We haven't set the date yet, but I believe it's going to be November 29th, which is the Thursday after Thanksgiving.
During the day?
No, 4 to 6.
4 to 6, I'm sorry.
So when that date gets confirmed, we'll announce that to the school committee members as well.
I'm sorry, can I ask one more
Sure.
question? So, I mean, we talked about the MCAS data the last time or the time before, and, it, you know, the growth is fabulous. When you do look at this from the diversity report, you know, it is concerning when you look at, was it at Tucker, 75% is the, what is that, on target, and we're at 78? So we're above target, but barely. And I don't know what 75% on target really means.
Mhm.
Is that I mean, I don't know what that means. That's new language for me, but we're at 78. You know, not great, but not a reflection, I don't know. I just
Yep.
want to note it. All right, I'm done.
Mr. Walker.
That's exactly right, and I think we need a discussion about, there's really two things here. One is staff and hiring, which is a very different discussion than student achievement. So my recommendation would be, we talk about both of those in a little more detail, but in separate discussions, because they're different discussions. What are the challenges in terms of staff hiring? What have we seen in terms of attrition? Have we lost any top talent? Have we recruited top talent? And there's some success stories there. Student achievement, it depends on what chart you're looking at, but in the aggregate, in the African American subgroup, we didn't meet target, and even more distressing, we didn't make any progress in closing the proficiency gap in 2012. So there's a lot to talk about there, and I agree with you. I'm hoping for an achievement gap strategy this year that is comprehensive and starts to show some progress, because in that particular area, in the African American subgroup, we didn't make any progress last year, and that's disturbing. Because there's all this other success around us, and we should celebrate that. I don't get me wrong, but we've got a challenge here that is, I think, being represented in pretty dramatic terms now.
Ms. Padero.
And, yeah, I'm sure this is easily explained, but in looking through it, so as the Milton School District, we didn't meet target in the African American category, but I don't find any school where we didn't meet the target. So how is that determined?
The subgroup has to have at least 40 students in a school to be considered a subgroup to be scored on at an individual school. But that doesn't mean if there was 25 at the Collicott who are students of color or non-white, 23 at the Collicott, that those add up to an amount that a district would be responsible for reporting out purposes. So that's why. So the Pierce has more than 40 students who are non-white, so in African American, black, or in the categories that
The
they
other
are.
groups have more than that.
You have need groups of
But
40.
do you guys have that information to target
Yes.
where the
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
So, yes, we do.
Ms. Kelly.
So in previous charts around AYP, for categories, you would still get reporting on categories that were under the threshold? So the system would have a sense of where we are. Is that available for these charts, or?
The amount of data that is available is considerable. So the data as to which subgroups of students, how they did, how they scored on different tests, down to the question down to relating that to whether it was correct or incorrect and what part of the standard it was based on. So we had 3 district members out yesterday in Chelsea at the data warehouse training who are going to now train the trainer. They're going to come back and train all administrators to use the data warehouse software that is free and provided by the state. That finally, this is the first year where we can really start to, what they would call, drill down the data to all students, groups of students, individual students, patterns with groups of students, patterns in curriculum, patterns in types of questions that were answered well, i.e. open response, law and comp, et cetera. So there is a plethora of data available to us, and we wanted to send folks out so we could make sure that we knew all the tools and all the bells and whistles of data warehouse to then provide that data to the folks who are the administrators and the coordinators, but then more importantly, to get it in the teachers' hands so we can really start to make some finer or more specific recommendations and tweaks and changes to our curriculum, our scope and sequences, and our instructional practices.
And I appreciate, and I hope to, I look forward to hearing that at future meetings, but in a diversity report, if you just look at the individual schools, you would think that there were no diverse subgroups in many of our schools, and therefore, this isn't giving us a sense of what's happening in our district. And I'm wondering whether, maybe this isn't the right chart, I'm not sure, but maybe something that would reflect the diversity of our schools, our individual schools, and not, run afoul of how we should be presenting this data.
And to Mr. Walker's point, we sat at this table when we had achievement gaps with children with special needs. And so you're right, it's happening. And for the African American Black group, the principals are examining the data with their teachers, reporting out, looking at which techniques they've had work, which techniques didn't work, everything from the MCAS support groups to the Saturday program to the targeted instruction. And so we can create those data points. But it's very, when staff looks at this, or the public, there are children, students populated in every one of these areas. And so when we come back for the MCAS presentation, that will be part of the first steps that we share. We can now, our people can now begin to populate those areas.
I just want to correct myself. Earlier I said at Tucker that we're at 78%. That was low income. We're at 89% for African American Black at Tucker. I was wrong. I read it the opposite way.
But with the district, that's the district, it's deceiving that if you look at the other sheets, you've got to really see the bar graph for every single school.
So to Member Kelly's point and to Member Bagley-Jones's point, either for the next report or for an amended report would like to be written at the wish of the committee that included a 5-year history of our staffing and the enrollment data broken out by school. Maybe additional data that could be included in the future, that will absolutely be done.
You, Ms. Bagley-Jones.
Sorry. That's always great to see. I think what I was trying to get at, I'm not volunteering for this, is that it sometimes feels like the Citizens for Diverse Milton, these reports are sort of separate from what we're doing, and I agree with you about the accountability, the work around the achievement gap, and like I said, I'm not volunteering to get this going, but it just feels like, what could we do outside of this committee to the administration's working really hard on it, Citizens for Diverse Milton are, the teachers are, the families are, but I don't know, I just feel like maybe that's like a world language committee or some kind of something to get things organized around it, because there's so many individual pockets of people, groups trying to do the best they can, and maybe we could, I don't know, it's late, I'm rambling, but it just feels like this is an add-on versus I want to see more meat to it, I guess, on the achievement gap.
Ms. Sheridan.
I really believe that the administration has this diversity work well under control with not only the outside Citizens for Diverse Milton, but also within the school site diversity committees
Committees.
within each school. So I really feel that the administration has this under control, and I look forward to hearing, as you've said, to more information on the data when the MCAS presentation is made.
Ms. Kelly?
So I can appreciate that you believe that it's under control. I think that the issue is, this needs to become part of what we discuss on a regular basis, not just something that we talk about in October, because we have a diversity policy. And I would also point out that the diversity policy isn't just about race.
Right.
It's our entire diversity. And so I'll leave it at that.
Motion on the floor, oh, sorry.
Can I just clarify? I agree with Ms. Sheridan's point. I absolutely think this administration is doing everything they can. I guess it's more what Ms. Kelly was saying about how do we talk about this on a regular basis, because people are doing such great work. I want it to be pulled together by all the different groups that are doing this work. Because they are.
So I just misunderstood. I thought you were looking for another committee or maybe something to, it wasn't clear to me what you were asking
I don't
for,
know
so.
what,
Okay,
really
thank you.
know.
All right, Mr. Walker?
This isn't and we'll talk about this when we talk about the superintendent's evaluation. This isn't a question of who's working hard. Everyone is working hard. Most people are working well. But when you talk about a particular topic like this, you need to tell a story. What were our challenges? What were our successes? What were our failures? And with regard to the achievement gap, I'm making the case that we don't have a coherent plan. We need a strategy, and we need some different strategies about how we will address that, because we've just gotten some more data that says what we're doing, however well-intentioned and however hard we're working, is not having the desired result. So, you know, everybody's working hard. They do a great job. There's no question about that. But we may need to think differently and do some different things. So we may need to bring a different team together, as Ms. Bagley-Jones is suggesting. We may need to get some outside help. There are any number of things we can talk about. But with regard to recruitment and hiring, that's one subject, and with regard to student achievement, that's another one. Everybody's working hard, but that, at the end of the day, we have to look at the results and go where that takes us.
So the motion on the floor is to accept this report. Anything further? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Mr. Fallon, field trips.
In your packet, you have a memo to Superintendent Gormley from myself dated October 17th that asks you to review the annual field trip list in accordance with Milton School Committee Policy IJOA-2, which is provided for you on the second page of the stapled memo. That's official language to say that a few years ago, the policy for field trips would be such that the same field trips would come in front of this group, and we would have continued conversation about each trip individually, and they would come back year in and year out. And some of that inconsistent approach towards each trip created barriers for our teachers to plan these annual trips that we have at the middle school and high school level especially. So the committee decided to adopt an annual field trip list that didn't have to go through that initial scrutiny each time they went out of the state or out of the country, and they were put on this list that it was agreed upon by the previous school board when this was adopted. So on the third page of the addendum that I gave you, or the memo that I gave you, there's a list of trips for the 2000, I apologize for the error, it should be 12-13 school year. And some of the trips that have been annualized by the committee will be active this year, and some of the trips that have been annualized by this committee will not be active this year. So essentially, we have at the Pierce Middle School an active proposal to go to Washington, D.C. for our 8th graders, an active proposal to go to Quebec City for our 7th and 8th graders. I believe some 6th will be invited. The trip to France is not active this year, as the chaperone did not respond, and the trip to Costa Rica is not available this year. At the high school, the active proposals will be the France and Spain trip. that will be solicited to attend for potential attendance this year. The active proposal for the New York City trip by the music department, and the trip for our hockey team has not been activated for this year. So what does this mean? It means that you're agreeing that these folks have their trips preliminarily approved by being on this list, but they still will need to provide an active proposal with the data and information in a little more detail prior to them going off on their trip.
So accept a motion to approve the annual field trip list for 2012, 2013.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Sheridan, second by Ms. Bagley Jones. Any comments?
I think I'd rather wait to see the proposals before I vote yes or no.
This is what we're getting.
Well, it says proposals forthcoming.
So there's, in to be more clear, this means that these trips are okayed, and when the proposals come, you can ask for more information, and more information will be provided. But the people who are chaperoning these trips are working with the understanding that their trip is approved, and they're making their accommodations and plans accordingly, i.e. recruiting students actively, soliciting companies and air flights, et cetera. And when those details become available, this is almost like a first read that's annually automated. That's the general intent of this annual list. As opposed to, we have a trip that a group in the Spanish department at the high school would like to go to New York. That will be a two-step proposal. I will have to present you that proposal with all the detail. You will look at it. I'll have to present it a second time to this group before they can attend that trip. So that will be done in isolation because it's not on this annual trip. That previous committees, and with all due respect, you can change that right now if you like, have taken this information as the first proposal, for lack of a better term.
Ms. Bagley Jones.
We went through this a while ago. Microphone's trying. We went through this a while ago because we didn't want to have to approve each field trip as they came up, because the kids need to earn money, the parents need to know, the teachers need to know. So all of these field trips that are on here, we've already had those initials. So maybe, John, that documentation, could be given to us again, because we already had those discussions on these current trips.
I'm sure I voted for it last year, but
Right, but
we could attach last
That's
year's
right.
proposals
to this, because that's
and
what
say,
we're approving, is what was already
Here's
discussed
what it
last
looked
year.
like last year. We don't expect
right.
any changes.
So I will get some more detail, but the notes across the front are just a blush of same vendor, fundraising offered, yes, how many days of school missed, those are the general
Right.
points, but I can get proposals, preliminary proposals from the active folks, and a write-up from them within maybe 2 school committee meetings, because none of them are happening until the spring. Is that
Ms.
okay?
Kelly.
So on the price, are we saying that the France-Spain trip is down by $31.50, or $31.50 is the cost? So what are we saying there?
It's similar. It would be $3,150 per student,
Oh,
which
okay.
means it's been consistently the same amount over time.
And
Those are
so when-
parentheses, not debit.
Right. They're going, oh, it went down by 30, what was it before? And then, so on the fundraising, this is what I can't understand. So if I'm planning a trip that's going to cost me $3,000, I'm thinking that I probably need to get my people on board a year in advance so that they can do
Yes.
fundraising activity and their family
Yes.
can save.
Yes.
So are we approving what's happening next year, or this trip is happening this year? I guess that's my question.
So the reason, one of the premises of having this done set in stone is so when I walk into high school as a 9th grader, I know I have 4 years that I might be able to go on this trip, and that I can choose the year in advance that I can start to save as a freshman and maybe go as a junior. Similar for the middle school trip. So we as a group decided that that's why one of our major reasons for putting this out on an annual basis is to give folks a projection in the future of, if you did want to do this trip in your high school years, this is the approximate cost. And if you want to, you can speak to Madame Bird or the chaperone and start to talk about it for the year that you're in or the following year, because you knew it may be offered and what the cost generally would be.
Right.
So these folks are looking to fill up these seats. They are talking to students about fundraising. They're actively talking to students. And there will be cases where there may not be enough numbers or students available to do the trip, and they may come back and cancel. But they do actively promote and advertise to see if students would like to attend in advance of this year, because it's on the annual list.
Right, which I appreciate, but I guess what I would, if this is an ongoing thing, then like what fundraising is being, I guess those are the kinds of things.
I'll get the
How-
detail.
You know, from an equity perspective, we want as many people who would like to participate in this to be able to.
Mhm.
So if there's an ongoing fundraising activity that will help offset the cost for some kids in need, then, you know, what are those activities that are
Mhm.
happening? That would be very useful information.
Okay.
Mr. Bagley-Johnson.
My understanding from the kids is that they know the Spain trip is coming up and they're saving their money, and that the individual fundraising is whatever the sponsor comes up with. You know, candles, car washes, whatever, but the kids are expected to do a lot of their own fundraising, and that's why they know ahead of time.
Correct.
That's what the kids say, like, oh, I know the Spain trip's coming up, I'm gonna do it next year, I gotta mow more lawns, or whatever. So that's what I understood,
So-
that they know it's coming.
Right,
That's
but
why
when
we
you
do
say I
this.
gotta mow lawns, we're saying to the family essentially.
Yes.
You guys do the savings.
That's my
Don't
understanding.
expect that a lot of offsetting will
Both.
come from fundraising.
Both.
Well,
But
those are the
there's
kind of
some-
details that I think.
There are some fundraisers that go on for the whole group, and then there's some individual fundraising, is
Correct.
my understanding.
Right, an example would be the music program
Yep.
trip, whereby they would all be saving on their own because they know it may be coming up annually. And then when Dr. Burdette gets the group together to say, we're thinking of going to New York City this year to do X, Y, and Z, what do we all think we can do for a fundraiser to, you know, lower the cost for each one of us? And they would get together and do group fundraising. Again, the annual piece of this is for families to know that they need to do some work on their own in advance, and then the chaperone gets together and provides opportunities as a group and by school to offset the cost as well.
So the motion is to approve the annual field trip list as presented.
So move.
It's already
Did
been
I
moved.
move it?
Yeah. Right, all those in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? It is 4-1-1. Ms. Kelly opposed, Mr. Walker abstaining.
Thank you. Very briefly, a reminder that this Saturday, I believe it's at 5 o'clock, the Athletic Hall of Fame induction. Excuse me?
5:30, I think.
5:30, excellent, down in the Copeland Fieldhouse, and then the receptions at Lantana's. Chris Herron, we mentioned, tomorrow night for the public. The Boosters Golf and Tournament will be next Tuesday, October 23rd. Again, go to our website. Next Friday and Saturday, a weekend away, the Hairspray Milton High School play, which will promise to be a favorite. Again, reminding parents to look for those communications from the schools on parent-teacher conferences on November 13th through 15th, and to be sure that you sign up. For the school committee, we have the special town meeting. Is that Monday night?
Yes.
Monday night? Excuse me?
What's the date?
The
22nd.
22nd. And we,
Next Monday.
right, and we mentioned the Monster Dash on October 28th. Thank you.
Finance Subcommittee report. Ms. Kelly.
May I ask something, Ms. Kelly?
You certainly may.
When we're having Finance Subcommittee Monday morning, and Mr. Walker, you had said you, on the capital, not voting. Mr. Patterson was out of school today. Mr. Gillis was going to take this. May we have Mr. Patterson at the Finance Subcommittee and move that to Monday morning?
That would be great.
Yep.
All right, so we'll take.
And if I might?
Yep.
And on this transfer, we've created, as we have for another piece, a script on the possible transfers, so that will expedite Monday morning on that item. We'll get that out to you tomorrow. In the end of the year report, if everyone gets their edits in, we talk about that Monday morning too. We get an extension to the day of the 8th, the morning after our November 7th meeting. In good shape there.
So, Ms. Kelly, the rest of your report, please.
That wiped out a whole bunch of my report. Negotiations with the power company and solar panel?
It's Mr. Gillis.
Oh, good, 'cause
So we were in a prolonged negotiation with Borrego, first-ranked proposer for the off-site solar project. If you recall, we had an RFP out for both an on-site and off-site. We completed the on-site project in January. It's been up and running since then, and it's been working very well. But the off-site project, we came to impasse essentially over language that when we would true up, and when we would make sure that the guarantee for this performance contract was going to happen. In our proposal, we had a one-year annual requirement. The Department of Energy Resources has a one-year annual requirement, and Borrego wouldn't move off of their three-year language. So we parted ways, and I've contacted the other companies that proposed. They're both still interested. They're going to see if they have sites and see if they can still hold their price and get back to me. And I'm supposed to hear from one of the companies next week, and the other one said they would give me a call when they had an answer.
Very good. Ms. Kelly?
is there a vote required of the school committee around this?
We voted to accept the original bid.
Yes, we did.
If they're interested, I assume we would have to vote to go to the second bidder.
Yes, and one of the two, the original proposal is their price is lower, but they didn't have the same level of experience. And the other one, the price was equal in the first 10 years and then higher, years 11 through 20. But that could change. The price of the panels have come down about 50%. So in this case, the real issue is the price of the land and/or land lease for the developer to get this done. So depending on where they find the land and how much that is will affect the price.
So what, right now, you've got a preliminary request out to see if the other bidders are still interested and will still give a price. And then, should they do that, you would be bringing back a recommendation to us to accept a bid.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Kelly?
Just, I think I would ask the administration to consult with legal to see what votes are required by the school committee. Because it seems to me if we've awarded a bid and we're now moving in a different direction, that we would need to somehow weigh in on that. Whether, the sequencing of it, I'm not sure, but.
We've consulted with town council on this. That's the council that helped us throughout the process. And they're satisfied that it's still the same procurement process. It's just been slow, that we could still award to the next bidder. Or
Right.
next proposer in this case.
And
Get it done
I
right.
totally understand that. I just would like us to consult with legal in terms of not what the procedure is to get to the next place, but if there are any loose ends in terms of a vote of the school committee to tie up the first road we went down, I guess is the way I would put it.
I mean, vote to
Rescind the others.
officially disengage from the
Yeah,
first process.
whatever legal
Yeah,
counsel would advise.
I can follow up with that.
Yeah.
They didn't say we had to advise, they just, if what the proposer was trying to alter was a significant term from what we had requested in the proposals. So in a sense, they knew what the basic framework of the contract was going to be when they bid on it, and they accepted that and bid it. And then they said, well, we want to do something different that's significant from that. We have the right to say, no, that's not acceptable. We're still looking for the same contract and the same performance. We'll just be writing a check to somebody else in effect.
Yeah.
We'll get that on writing for
Yep.
legal.
If I might.
Yeah, Mr. Walker?
If we voted to authorize you to execute a contract with a particular vendor, then we would need to vote to authorize you to execute a contract with a different vendor. So, there's at the very least that, but I would agree with Ms. Kelly, we should have a detailed conversation with town council about where we are, how we got there, and where we need to go next, and how the school committee needs to be involved.
I'll see if I can have an answer for Monday morning's finance.
Great.
Great. And strategic plan?
We have, that's a continual discussion. We talked about the timing, and in our proposal on Monday morning, we have a proposal within the FY13 budget.
Great.
We wanted to keep it on the agenda.
All right.
And that's it for me.
Policy Subcommittee
committee, I'm
report.
sorry.
We've
It's all
pulled the
about you.
non-discrimination on the basis of disability policy, but we still have the wellness policy second reading.
Yep, so it's a second reading and/or a adoption, and it just has the changes that were requested.
So are you moving adoption of policy IHAMD?
I am.
Second.
And second by Mr. Walker. Any comments on the Milton Public Schools wellness policy, IHAMD?
We need to give thanks to the Wellness Committee for their input on this, and Jackie Morgan.
A job well done? No. All those in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. Old business, citizen speak topic response. I think we just did 2 hours on that earlier on. Any other citizen speak topic response? Next meeting agenda items, we have a few here that are being referred to finance that will be back for our next meeting. Anything else other than what's already scheduled for it? Yes.
I thought that we had talked about perhaps having another meeting somewhere because we're really behind in terms of our calendar and the topics, et cetera. Did that ever get discussed or no?
Well, certainly one has not been set.
Did we talk about posting before or after town meeting?
That was one of the things that was put on the table, but I thought, someone was going to take a look at the agenda items and see if there was something we could easily siphon off.
Yeah,
But as I read the warrant for special town meeting, I'm not so sure that.
I'm
we'll
not so
ever
sure
work.
afterwards is a good
So-
idea, and I actually teach right up to the beginning of it, so I'm not available before town meeting. I've asked us to be posted for town meeting, not for before town meeting. 'Cause, I'll be arriving just as it starts.
But so I guess, going into the budgets, there's a lot on our plate, and if it means that we need to add a meeting, and I know nobody wants it, but it seems to me we're behind a little bit, and we need to catch up, and
Well,
entertaining another meeting somewhere in there.
Actually, our next meeting is not scheduled for
7th.
7th, yeah, it's 3 weeks. So
So I guess
we
that's
have
my
some
point.
space. I don't think you want to do it in 2 weeks.
Not on Halloween.
Not on Halloween evening, Halloween night. I don't think it'd be a good idea. Although, who knows, it might be appropriate. I have no idea. So if we were going to do it, it would be probably a week from tonight on the 24th. I don't have my calendar with me, but why don't we have Charlene poll
Yes.
and see if the 24th is possible as a catch-up meeting to get a few things off our agenda. Anything, then, our final item is to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of discussion, an update on grievances. We will adjourn from executive session and not return to open session. This requires a roll call vote. All those, Ms. Badera?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Sheridan?
Yes.
Yes, myself, yes. And
Yes.
Shelley, yes.